The Hellfire Gala had always been about proving something. Not power. Krakoa had power. The mutant nation had reshaped geopolitics in under 2 years, established sovereignty through force and miracle, and made the world's governments negotiate on its terms. No, the Gala existed to prove something more fragile, that mutants could be trusted with that power. That they could throw a party without the world ending. Tonight that gamble was about to fail. The venue sprawled across Krakoa's western shore, where bioluminescent flowers turned the coastline into a constellation. Ambassadors mingled with heroes. CEOs laughed with telepaths. The X-Men in formal attire that still somehow suggested combat readiness moved through the crowd like sentries at a state dinner. Emma Frost held court near the central pavilion, her white gown catching light like carved ice. Cyclops stood 3 conversations away. His visor's red glow dimmed, but never absent tracking movement patterns, the way other men tracked stock tickers. Everything was perfect. Choreographed. Controlled. Then the sky tore open. Not a portal. Not the usual shimmer of a gateway opening. This was rupture. Reality screamed. The dimensional rift cracked the air above the Gala like lightning frozen in place, a wound in space that bled wrongness. Guests stumbled back. Someone's champagne glass shattered on a marble. The sound was swallowed by a deeper noise, a bass-frequency groan that vibrated in bone marrow. Through the tier, sentinels poured, not the lumbering giants from history lessons. These were sleek modern, each one, a statement of industrial hatred wrapped in adaptive plating. They hit the ground in formation sensor arrays, already sweeping for mutant signatures. The Gala's defensive protocols activated instantly. Krakoan vines erupted from the earth. Force fields shimmered into existence. X-Men moved, shedding pretense, becoming what they'd always been beneath the formal wear. And through the chaos, through the rift that shouldn't exist, fell something else. She was small. That registered first. A woman who might charitably be called petite, dropping through the dimensional tear with no parachute, no visible means of slowing her descent. Dark dress whipping in free fall. Green hair streaming upward. For one absurd moment, she looked like debris, just another piece of wreckage tumbling from the sky. Then she stopped, not slowed. Stopped. 10 feet from impact, suspended, as if gravity had simply changed its mind. Her eyes opened. Green, bright, and absolutely furious. The nearest sentinel turned its sensors toward her targeting arrays, cycling through threat assessment protocols. It never finished the calculation. The machine lifted off the ground like a toy snatched by an invisible hand. Metal shrieked. The sentinel crumpled inward, its adaptive plating folding like aluminum foil crushed by forces that left no fingerprints. The wreckage hung there for a heartbeat, a compacted sphere of technology and malice, before it shot upward into the night sky. The explosion came 3 seconds later, high enough that the fireball was just light, no shrapnel, no collateral. Controlled demolition by someone who'd done this math before. "Civilian down," someone shouted, pointing at the small woman now standing on Krakoan soil. She didn't look down, didn't acknowledge the title. Her attention locked onto the next sentinel, and the air around her began to shimmer with visible distortion. Emma's voice cut through the comms, sharp enough to draw blood. "That is not a civilian. Someone identify her, now." Cyclops was already moving hand signals, deploying the team into evacuation pattern Delta. Get the guests clear. Contain the sentinels. Assess the newcomer. Standard crisis protocol executed with the precision of a team that had weathered apocalypses. But there was nothing standard about what happened next. 2 sentinels advanced on the woman from opposite angles. Adaptive tactical subroutines, calculating crossfire solutions. She raised one hand almost lazily. Both machines stopped, not frozen, gripped. Invisible pressure seized them mid-stride servos, whining in protest as they fought against bonds that had no physical form. The woman's fingers curled into a fist. The sentinels bent, not at joints, not along designed stress points. They bent everywhere at once, metal flowing like water under impossible pressure. The sound was terrible, a sustained shriek of structural failure that set teeth on edge. Within seconds, both hunters had been reduced to abstract sculptures, twisted into shapes that mocked their original purpose. She released them. They fell. The impact cracked marble. Telekinetic. Jean Grey's voice came over the comms, steady, but threaded with something that might have been concern. Omega-class power signature. I'm reading force application on a scale that shouldn't be possible from a single source. The woman moved through the gala grounds like a storm with legs. No hesitation, no questions. A sentinel rose to intercept her energy weapons charging. She didn't break stride. The machine simply inverted, yanked upward, and spun like a drill bit, then slammed into the earth hard enough to crater stone. She stepped over the wreckage without looking down. 3 more sentinels coordinated their approach, learning from their predecessors' failures. Energy beams lanced toward her from multiple vectors. They stopped 3 feet from her body, frozen in midair, the coherent light bending around an invisible sphere. For a moment, the beams hung there, painting her in harsh illumination. Then they reversed, slammed back into their sources with catastrophic results. Explosions lit the night. Guests screamed. The evacuation was chaos now, diplomats and heroes alike scrambling for safety. Through it all, the woman in the black dress advanced methodical as a surgeon, brutal as an executioner. Every sentinel she encountered stopped being a machine and became a problem solved. Crushed, torn, compacted, disposed of. Storm called down lightning to disable a sentinel, threatening a cluster of fleeing ambassadors. Before the bolt could strike, the machine was already airborne, ripped from the earth by unseen hands, and hurled toward the ocean. It landed a quarter-mile out. The splash was visible even from shore. "She's protecting them," Storm said over the comms, surprise evident. "The civilians. She's creating safe corridors." Cyclops watched a sentinel get folded into a perfect cube, then used as a projectile to disable 2 others. "She's also destroying evidence. Look at the trajectories. Nothing's falling into the crowd. Everything's going up or out." Emma's response was ice over static. "How considerate. I'm sure the world will appreciate the restraint when they see the footage." Because there was footage. Of course there was. In the age of smartphones and social media, catastrophe was always documented. But more than that, hidden among the fleeing guests, camouflage drones hovered at precise angles. Orcus hardware. Broadcasting. The woman didn't notice. Or didn't care. A sentinel landed in front of her, adaptive plating shifting to absorb kinetic impact. She looked at it. The machine's torso compressed inward ribs of reinforced alloy, bending inward like a crushed can. The sentinel folded until it was the size of a basketball. She flicked her wrist. It shot skyward, another star in the night's constellation of violence. The remaining sentinels began to retreat, tactical algorithms recognizing a losing scenario. She let them go. Turned instead toward the dimensional rift, still bleeding wrongness into Krakoan airspace. For the first time since arriving, she spoke. "Close it." 2 words, directed at no one. A command issued to the universe itself. When nothing happened, her eyes narrowed. The air around the rift began to shimmer, distortion waves spreading from an invisible epicenter. The tear in reality trembled, started to contract. For a moment it seemed like she might simply will it shut through pure force. Then it collapsed on its own dimensional instability, reaching critical threshold. The rift sealed with a sound like tearing silk. And suddenly the night was quiet except for alarms and distant sobbing. The woman landed feet touching marble as gently as falling snow. She surveyed the destruction with the expression of someone checking if they'd missed a spot. Satisfied, she started walking. Not toward the X-Men, not toward the gathered heroes now emerging from defensive positions. Just walking as if the gala grounds were public property and she had every right to cross them. Cyclops stepped into her path. Not aggressive, not submissive. The stance of someone who'd negotiated with gods and wasn't impressed by new ones. You need to stop, right there. She stopped, looked at him. Her eyes were vivid green, sharper than any visor. Why? Because we need to understand what just happened. Who you are, where you came from. That rift wasn't random. Someone opened it. Someone with significant dimensional manipulation technology. Don't care. She started walking again. You're standing on sovereign Krakoan territory. Emma Frost's voice came from behind him, every syllable cut from diamond. Uninvited, unvetted, having just engaged in unauthorized military action that will dominate tomorrow's news cycle. So you should care, darling, because you've just become our problem. The woman stopped again, turned, looked at Emma with the kind of attention people usually reserved for insects. Your problem is whoever sent those machines, not me. Debatable, Emma replied. What's your name? Silence. The standoff stretched. Around them, X-Men maintained perimeter positions ready, but not aggressive. Guests were being evacuated through gateways, now official Krakoan portals shepherding them to safety. The cleanup was already beginning, teams moving in to contain wreckage, secure evidence control the narrative before it controlled them. Finally, the woman spoke. Tatsumaki. Charming. And you're here because didn't choose to be here. Her gaze flicked to where the rift had been. That wasn't my doing. I was somewhere else. Then I wasn't. Then I was falling. Then there were machines trying to kill people, so I stopped them. Jean stepped forward to her presence, softer than Emma's cut glass edges. We're grateful. You saved lives. But Scott's right. We need to understand what happened. That dimensional breach, the timing, the Sentinels. This was coordinated. Someone wanted this to happen at the gala specifically. Tatsumaki's expression flickered. Not quite concern. More like irritation at a puzzle she hadn't asked to solve. Show me where the rift opened. I can trace the source. Absolutely not, Emma said. You're not conducting investigations on Krakoan soil. You're going to come with us, submit to a basic telepathic scan to verify your intentions, and then we'll discuss what happens next. The temperature dropped. Not literally, but everyone with combat experience felt it. The shift in stance, the way Tatsumaki's eyes went flat and cold. No one scans my mind. Then no one trusts you, Emma replied. Simple math, darling. For a moment it seemed like the gala's violence might resume with a different combatant. Then a new voice cut through the tension, calm as deep water. Perhaps we can find middle ground. Professor Charles Xavier approached in his hover chair, the picture of reason in a night of chaos. His presence shifted the dynamic immediately. Not through power, through weight. Decades of being the bridge between human and mutant, the voice that spoke when violence seemed inevitable. Miss Tatsumaki, he continued, I understand your resistance to telepathic examination. Many share your concern, but you've arrived on our doorstep through mysterious means, demonstrated extraordinary power, and become entangled in what appears to be an attack, specifically designed to damage Krakoa's international standing. Surely you can appreciate our need for certainty. Tatsumaki looked at him, really looked. You're the telepath. I am one of them, yes. Then you should understand why I'm saying no. Xavier inclined his head. I do. The mind is sacred, inviolate. I've spent my life defending that principle. which is why I'm asking permission, not taking it. A surface scan. Nothing deeper than verifying you mean us no immediate harm. Surely that's acceptable if you're truly here by accident. You assume I care if you trust me. No, Xavier said gently. I assume you care about resolving the situation quickly, so you can address whatever brought you here in the first place. Because I'm reading anxiety beneath your anger. Not for yourself. For someone else. Someone you need to return to. Tatsumaki went very still. When she spoke, her voice was quieter, colder. Stay out of my head. I haven't entered it. I'm simply observing what you show the world. The same way anyone might notice tension in shoulders or urgency in movement. You're worried, understandable. But cooperation will get you home faster than conflict. The silence that followed was broken by a new sound. A chime from Cyclops' communicator. He glanced down and his expression hardened in a way that made Emma turn. What? News alert. Multiple sources. Footage is already online. He turned the device so they could see. A video played shot from multiple angles edited together with professional speed. Tatsumaki crushing sentinels, the explosions, the destruction, and a headline scrolling beneath in bold letters, Krakoa unleashes unknown weapon at diplomatic event. Well, Emma said, her voice acid. Congratulations, darling. You're not just our problem. You're tonight's headline. Tatsumaki watched the footage without expression. That's not what happened. Irrelevant, Emma replied. That's what they'll believe. Which means tomorrow morning every news network will be asking why Krakoa deployed a weapon of mass destruction at a peace conference. Why we're hiding weapons that can tear through sentinels like paper. Why the world should trust us with autonomy when we clearly have assets we haven't disclosed. I'm not your weapon. The footage disagrees, and footage is truth in the modern age, regardless of facts. Emma turned to Xavier. We need damage control, immediately. Statement from the council. Explanation, something. We need answers first, Cyclops said. Who opened that rift? Why? And why were Orcus sentinels waiting on the other side? All eyes turned to Tatsumaki. She stared back unmoved. Not my problem to solve. It became your problem the moment you fell through that rift, Xavier said quietly. Because whether you intended it or not, you're now part of a much larger conflict. One that could determine whether my people live in peace or under renewed persecution. So I'm asking again. Please, let me verify your intentions. Help us understand what happened. And in return, we'll help you find your way home. Tatsumaki was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, each word was clipped final. One scan, surface only. You go deeper, I put you through a wall. Xavier inclined his head. Acceptable. Though I should note threatening violence against attempts to probe your mind suggests either legitimate trauma or something to hide. I'm choosing to believe the former. Believe what you want. They stood there on the ruined gala grounds, surrounded by twisted metal and shattered marble, while somewhere in the world, video of the evening's chaos was being watched by millions. The narrative was already forming, hardening like concrete around whatever truth existed. In a secure facility 3,000 miles away, an Orcus operative reviewed the same footage and smiled. Everything had gone exactly as planned. Better even. The rift had been a calculated risk dimensional technology pushed to theoretical limits. The Sentinels were expendable assets sacrificed to draw out Krakoa's response. And the woman Tatsumaki, she was an unexpected gift, unknown, powerful, terrifying on camera. Perfect. The operative began composing the next press release. By morning, the world would be demanding answers, demanding protections, demanding that something be done about Krakoa's weapons program, about the escalating arms race, about the clear and present danger represented by mutants who could summon destroyers from other dimensions. Fear was always easier to sell than facts, and Orcus had just acquired a nightmare to market. Back at the gala grounds, Xavier extended his hand toward Tatsumaki. "Shall we?" She looked at the offered hand like it might bite. Then, with visible reluctance, nodded once. "Make it quick." The telepathic touch was gentle, professional. Xavier's mind brushed against hers with the lightness of a physician checking for fever, seeking only surface thoughts, immediate intentions. What he found made him pause. Not malice, not deception, but a wall. Not built, inherent. Her mind had structure like he'd never encountered foreign architecture that suggested she wasn't just from another place, but another framework entirely. And beneath it, burning like a star, one driving thought. "Get back! Find her! Protect her!" Xavier withdrew. She's telling the truth. No hostile intent toward Krakoa. She's here by accident, and her primary concern is returning to wherever she came from. Wherever that is, Emma noted. Somewhere with someone she cares about very much. Xavier looked at Tatsumaki with something approaching sympathy. Someone she's afraid for. Tatsumaki's expression didn't change. "Are we done?" "For now," Cyclops said. "But you'll need to stay on Krakoa until we sort this out. The Council will want to speak with you. We'll need your account of what happened. And we'll need to figure out how to close the narrative gap between what actually occurred and what the world thinks it saw." "I don't do politics." "Then learn," Emma said sharply. "Because politics is about to do you. By dawn, you'll be on every news channel as proof that Krakoa is developing weapons. Your face will be used to justify increased Sentinel deployment, stricter mutant laws, and quite possibly military action against this island. So you can either help us control that narrative or watch it crush both of us." Tatsumaki looked at the ruined gala grounds, at the twisted metal, at the cleanup crews working to contain the damage. Then she looked back at Emma. "I didn't ask to be here. Didn't ask to be your problem. I just want to go home." "I know," Xavier said gently, "and we'll help you. But first, we need to survive the morning. Together." The word hung there. Together. An alliance neither had chosen. A partnership born from catastrophe and conspiracy. Tatsumaki didn't respond, just turned and walked toward the interior of Krakoa, following the path Cyclops indicated. Her posture radiated rejection of every implication, every expectation, every attempt to make her part of their world. But she was part of it now. The footage ensured that, and in the quiet council chambers, already emergency protocols were activating. Leaders were being summoned. Arguments were forming about what Tatsumaki represented: asset or liability, victim or threat weapon or warning. The gala had been about proving mutants could be trusted. Instead, it had proven they could still be feared, and somewhere watching through a dozen different camera feeds, Orcus counted it as a victory. The quiet council chamber existed in a space that rejected geometry. Krakoan bioarchitecture shaped itself around purpose rather than blueprint, creating a room that felt both intimate and vast, organic yet deliberate. Seats emerged from living wood arranged in a circle that eliminated hierarchies while creating perfect sightlines. Bioluminescence provided ambient light that shifted with the mood of discussions, currently a cool blue that suggested deep water and deeper concerns. Tatsumaki stood in the center, refusing the offered seat. Around her, the most powerful mutants on Earth evaluated their newest problem. Emma Frost had changed from her gala gown into something equally white, but infinitely more severe, a suit that suggested boardrooms and hostile takeovers. She studied Tatsumaki the way auction houses studied unmarked paintings looking for value or forgery. "Let's establish facts. You claim you're from another dimension entirely. Not another Earth in our multiverse, but something outside our framework altogether." "I don't claim anything," Tatsumaki replied. "That's what your telepath confirmed. I was somewhere else. Then I was here. I don't know how. Don't care about your framework. How refreshing, Emma said, acid dripping from every syllable. Someone who doesn't care about frameworks while standing in the middle of one that's barely holding together. Tell me, do you have any idea what you've cost us? Cyclops leaned forward slightly, visor glowing in the chamber's dim light. 12 hours since the gala. 43 countries have filed formal complaints. The UN Security Council is calling an emergency session. 3 major news networks are running continuous coverage under the headline, Krakoa's Secret Weapon. We're looking at the biggest PR crisis since we declared independence. Not my problem. It became your problem when you decided to play hero. Emma snapped. We had protocols, procedures. The X-Men were handling the Sentinel incursion. You inserted yourself into a carefully balanced situation and turned it into a spectacle. Storm spoke from her position near the chamber's eastern arc, her voice carrying the weight of weather systems. The Sentinels were targeting civilians. She responded appropriately. Would you prefer she had allowed the massacre to proceed? I'd prefer she had trusted us to handle our own sovereignty, Emma replied. But since that ship has sailed, exploded, and been broadcast to 3 billion people, we need to decide what to do with her. Magneto had been silent until now, seated with the posture of someone who'd overthrown governments and found them wanting. When he spoke, his accent carried old-world edges that made even casual observation sound like pronouncements. The question is not what we do with her. The question is what she represents. Power that answers to no nation, no law, no ideology. Simply existing, acting, refusing categorization. He looked at Tatsumaki with something that might have been respect. The world has spent centuries trying to control such things. They will not stop simply because we ask nicely. Then we don't ask, Tatsumaki said. I'll leave. Problem solved. Except you can't leave, Professor Xavier interjected gently. The dimensional rift that brought you here was generated by technology we don't possess. Until we understand its mechanics, you're stranded. And attempting to create your own exit could destabilize local space further. We've already detected residual dimensional stress around the incident site. A notification chimed. Cyclops glanced at his communicator and his jaw tightened. We have a situation. Japan just announced emergency Sentinel deployment in Tokyo. South Korea is following suit. They're citing dimensional threats and unregulated superweapons as justification. 6 hours, Emma said flatly. It took them 6 hours to weaponize this. That's not reactive policy. That's coordinated response. Orcus had this planned before the gala even started. Tatsumaki's jaw tightened. The first crack in her armor of indifference. How long? Unknown. We're analyzing the rift's signature, but the technology appears to be based on principles our scientists haven't encountered. Days at minimum, possibly weeks. The temperature in the room seemed to drop, not from Storm's influence, from the small woman at its center, whose fury was becoming a tangible presence. I don't have weeks. We understand you're concerned about someone, Xavier said. Someone you left behind when the rift took you. But acting rashly will only strand you here permanently. Let us help you. In return, help us manage the situation your arrival created. I didn't create anything. Someone else opened that rift. Someone else sent those machines. I just responded. Correct, Cyclops said, which is why we need to find out who. Orcus is the obvious suspect. They've been escalating for months, pushing toward another mutant extinction scenario. A dimensional rift appearing at our most visible diplomatic event loaded with sentinels and perfectly positioned cameras. That's not coincidence. That's strategy. Emma pulled up holographic displays images floating in the chamber's center. News headlines, social media trends, expert panels debating mutant threats. They're winning. Look at the narrative. Krakoa hides dimensional weapons. Unknown superweapon deployed without oversight. What else are they hiding? Every piece frames us as the threat, not Orcus. By tomorrow, public opinion will support increased Sentinel deployment. Stricter controls on mutant activity, possibly military intervention. Let them come, Magneto said quietly. We have faced extinction before. We survived. At what cost? Storm challenged. How many died in those survivals? How many will die in the next one? As many as choose warfare over coexistence, Magneto replied. I am not advocating violence. I am simply stating reality. The world fears power it cannot control. This woman represents uncontrolled power. Therefore, the world will try to eliminate her. And when they do, we must decide, do we hand her over, or do we accept the consequences of protecting her? All eyes turned to Tatsumaki. She stared back unmoved. I don't need protecting. Everyone needs protecting from something, Xavier said. Even you. Otherwise you wouldn't be so desperate to return home. Silence. Then very quietly, Tatsumaki spoke. My sister. I need to get back to my sister. The revelation shifted something in the room. Not sympathy exactly, understanding. Jean Grey, who'd been observing from her seat with the stillness of deep water, finally spoke. How old is she? 23. Old enough to handle herself, usually. Tatsumaki's hands clenched. But I'm supposed to be there. I'm supposed to protect her. That's the job. That's always been the job. Then we have aligned interests, Xavier said. You want to return home. We want to understand the rift technology and prevent further incursions. Work with us. Share what you know about how you arrived. Help us investigate Orcus's involvement. In return, we'll dedicate resources to finding you a way back. And in the meantime, Emma asked, what do we tell the world about our mysterious new resident? She's visiting from another dimension. Please don't panic. That will certainly calm international tensions. Cyclops pulled up another set of images. Satellite photos of facilities, troop movements, defense contractors ramping up production. Orcus is mobilizing. They're using the Gala incident to justify expansion. New Sentinel production, enhanced surveillance. They're building towards something big. Emma leaned forward, her expression arctic. And if nations withdraw recognition in response, we lose more than diplomatic standing. Trade routes collapse. Medical supplies, technology imports. The gateway network that keeps Krakoa functional depends on international cooperation. Push them too hard, and we're back to siege conditions. They're building toward us, Storm said. The same pattern as before. Manufacture fear. Propose solutions. Implement genocide. We've seen this play before. Then we break the pattern, Cyclops replied. We find proof that Orcus orchestrated the rift. Expose their manipulation. Turn the narrative back on them. Proof requires investigation, Emma noted. Investigation requires time. Time we don't have while the world debates whether to attack us. We need a strategy, now. Tatsumaki had been listening with growing impatience. You talk too much. Someone tried to start a war using me as the excuse. Find them. Deal with them. Stop arguing about it. Spoken like someone who's never had to consider political consequences, Emma said coldly. This isn't a simple problem you can crush with telekinesis. This is public opinion, international law, media manipulation, and fear. You can't punch fear into submission. Can't you? Magneto's tone suggested genuine curiosity. The world fears mutants regardless of our actions. Peace didn't save us. Cooperation didn't save us. Hiding didn't save us. What makes you think gentleness will succeed where everything else failed? Because this time we have sovereignty, Storm countered. We have a nation, laws, international recognition. We're not fighting as outcasts anymore. We're negotiating as equals. Equals who just deployed an unexplained superweapon? Emma reminded her. I'm not saying Magneto's right. I'm saying the optics are catastrophic, and optics are reality in the modern age. The argument spiraled, voices rising, as old ideological fault lines reasserted themselves. Peaceful coexistence versus defensive isolation. PR management versus direct action. Trust in institutions versus trust in power. The same debates that had defined mutant politics for decades, now crystallizing around the small woman who stood at their center and looked profoundly uninterested in any of it. Finally, Xavier raised a hand. The gesture was small, but silence followed like gravity. We're losing focus. The immediate question is not ideology. It's pragmatic. Tatsumaki is here. Orcus is using her presence to escalate hostilities. What do we do in the next 48 hours to prevent war? We could introduce her publicly, Jean suggested. Controlled press conference. Explain that she's a refugee from a dimensional accident, not a weapon. Show her humanity. Make it harder for them to paint her as a threat. Tatsumaki's laugh was short and harsh. I'm not doing press conferences. Then you're accepting that the only narrative about you will be Orcus's narrative, Emma said. Is that acceptable? I don't care what people think about me. Perhaps you should, Xavier said gently. Because what they think about you will determine what they do to you. And to us for harboring you. Fear drives policy, and policy drives action. If we can't humanize you, we can't protect you from what's coming. I don't need... Yes, you've established that you don't need protecting, Emma interrupted. But we do. Krakoa does. The thousands of mutants living here who finally found safety do. So stop being selfish and consider that your refusal to engage might cost people who didn't ask to be part of this their lives. The words landed like physical blows. Tatsumaki's expression went very still, very cold. For a moment it seemed like the chamber's bioarchitecture might start crumpling inward from invisible pressure. Then she spoke, each word precise as a scalpel. Don't lecture me about protecting people. I've protected more people than you've ever met. Saved cities, stopped invasions, fought things that would crack your mind just looking at them. I didn't ask to be here. Didn't ask to be your crisis. But I'm also not going to pretend to be something I'm not, just to make your politics easier. No one's asking you to pretend, Cyclops said. We're asking you to consider that strength isn't always about force. Sometimes it's about strategy. Sometimes it's about letting people see the human being instead of the weapon. I'm not your weapon. We know that, Storm said quietly. But the world doesn't. And that distinction matters. That's the point. We're trying to build a world where being different doesn't mean being disposable. Where power doesn't automatically equal threat. You're proof that power can exist outside human frameworks entirely. That should terrify them. Instead, we need to make it reassuring. Tatsumaki looked at Storm for a long moment. By lying, by choosing what truths to emphasize, Emma corrected. You saved lives at the gala. That's truth. You refused to kill when you could have. Truth. You're worried about your sister. Truth. You want to go home. Truth. All of those are more useful narratives than uncontrollable superweapon that appeared from nowhere and crushed our robots. They weren't your robots. The distinction will be lost on most viewers, Emma replied. All they'll see is power. Terrifying, overwhelming power in the hands of someone who owes them nothing and answers to no authority. How do you think that ends? Silence settled like dust. Around the circle, council members watched Tatsumaki with varying degrees of concern, calculation, and something that might have been pity. She hated the pity most. There may be another approach, Xavier said finally. If we can prove Orcus created the rift deliberately, we shift the entire conversation. They're not responding to a Krakoan threat. They're manufacturing one. The question becomes not, why did Krakoa deploy a weapon, but why did Orcus attack a diplomatic event with dimensional weapons? Cyclops nodded slowly. We'd need evidence. Technical analysis of the Rift transmission logs, anything linking it to known Orcus facilities. We have something better, Jean said. We have someone who came through the Rift. Someone whose arrival they clearly didn't expect or control. She looked at Tatsumaki. You felt the transition, the dimensional breach. Could you trace it back to its source? Maybe, if I had a starting point, something to anchor the search. We have the residual signature at the incident site, Xavier said. Cerebro could help you trace it, not by amplifying your power directly, but by mapping the dimensional scar the rift left behind. Your psionic senses would provide the anchor point. Cerebro would provide the resolution to follow the thread back to its source. Tatsumaki's eyes narrowed. You're talking about using me as a detector, a very sophisticated one, Jean replied. Your telekinesis operates through spatial awareness at levels we can't match, combined with Cerebro's ability to map psionic phenomena across vast distances. It's possible you could trace the rift's origin point. Possible isn't certain. Nothing is certain, Xavier said. But it's the best option we have. Find the source of the rift, we find evidence of Orcus's involvement. Expose their manipulation, and the narrative shifts. The world stops seeing you as our weapon and starts seeing you as their victim. I'm not a victim. Then help us prove you're not a threat, Emma said. Because right now, in the court of public opinion, you're both. And we can't fight both battles simultaneously. Magneto spoke again, his voice low and measured. There is a third option. We could simply let them fear you. Fear us. Accept that coexistence was always a fantasy, and prepare for the inevitable conflict. I have walked that path before. It leads to survival, though rarely to peace. It also leads to Genosha, Storm said sharply. To mass graves and trauma that still echoes. I won't walk that path again, not if there's any alternative. Then find the alternative, Magneto replied. But don't pretend the choice won't come. It always comes. And when it does, we must be ready to defend ourselves with more than good intentions and press releases. The debate threatened to spiral again. Old wounds reopening, old arguments resurfacing. Cyclops interrupted with a sharp gesture. We have another problem. Analysis of the Gala footage shows Orcus drones weren't just recording. They were intercepting network traffic. There's a high probability they've compromised our external communications. Emma's expression went dangerous. How much did they hear? Unknown. But we should assume they have access to anything transmitted during or after the attack. Which means they know we're confused, divided, and scrambling for answers. The revelation settled over the council like frost. If Orcus could hear them, every word became ammunition. Every doubt became propaganda. Xavier stopped further argument with a single quiet question directed at Tatsumaki. What do you want? Not what you think you should want. Not what we need you to want. What do you actually want? Tatsumaki was quiet for so long that some council members shifted uncomfortably. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat, drained of the anger that had sustained it. I want to wake up in my apartment. I want to hear my sister complaining about hero work politics. I want everything to be normal and boring and exactly what it was before someone ripped me out of my life and dropped me into yours. She paused. But that's not happening. So I want the next best thing. I want to find whoever did this, make sure they can't do it again, and get home before my sister does something stupid trying to find me. Then we have a deal, Xavier said. We help you trace the rift, identify its creators, and find a way to reverse the process. You help us manage the political fallout and prevent this from escalating into open warfare. Agreed. Tatsumaki looked around the circle. at faces both familiar from news coverage and utterly alien in person. Leaders of a nation she hadn't known existed yesterday. People fighting battles she didn't understand for reasons she'd never considered. Part of her wanted to refuse on principle to maintain the distance she'd built between herself and everyone else's problems. But the alternative was standing here while her sister faced whatever came next, alone. And that wasn't acceptable. "Agreed," she said finally, "but I'm not doing press conferences, and if anyone tries to use me as propaganda, I leave." "Fair enough," Xavier said. "We'll work within those parameters. For now you should rest. We've prepared quarters for you in the habitat rings. Tomorrow we'll begin the investigation." "I don't need rest." "Nevertheless," Emma said, "you'll take it. You're no use to anyone exhausted, and contrary to your apparent beliefs, you are not invincible. Go. Sleep. Let us handle the immediate crisis management. When you wake, we'll have a plan." Tatsumaki wanted to argue. The impulse was automatic reflexive, but beneath the anger and frustration was something else. Exhaustion. Not physical. The deeper kind that came from holding up walls that never stopped pressing inward. For years, she'd been the last line of defense, the one who handled problems when everyone else failed. The weight of that was constant, familiar as breathing. Maybe for one night she could let someone else carry it. "Fine," she said. "One night, then we work." She turned and walked toward the chamber's exit, which opened obligingly into a tunnel lined with bioluminescent flora. Behind her, the council erupted into immediate debate, voices overlapping as they dissected plans and contingencies. She didn't listen, didn't care about their strategies or concerns. All she cared about was getting back to Fubuki before something happened that she couldn't fix. The tunnel led to living quarters that were somehow both alien and comfortable rooms, grown from Krakoan biology that anticipated needs before they were voiced. A bed that adjusted to ideal firmness. Lighting that responded to mood. Temperature regulation that required no input. Tatsumaki ignored all of it. Stood at the window instead, looking out over an island nation that glowed in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Orcus was planning, plotting, using her as justification for whatever atrocities they'd already decided to commit. And somewhere even farther across dimensional barriers, she couldn't see or measure, her sister was probably tearing apart the Hero Association, trying to find answers that didn't exist in that world. She pressed her hand against the window. The glass was warm, olive, in a way normal glass never was. Everything here was alive, interconnected, part of systems she didn't understand and hadn't asked to join, but she was part of them now. At least until she could find a way out. Outside, in secure facilities across 3 continents, Orcus operation centers hummed with activity. They'd seen the council meeting through infiltrated surveillance systems. Heard enough to know their manufactured crisis was working exactly as intended. The mutants were divided, desperate, and making exactly the kind of mistakes that desperate people always made. Phase 1 was complete. Introduce chaos, create a threat, force a reaction. Phase 2 would be more interesting, force Krakoa to deploy their weapon again. Get more footage, more proof, more justification. And if the small woman with the vivid green eyes became collateral damage in the process, well, that's what weapons were for. Somewhere between sleep and waking, Tatsumaki felt the dimensional fabric of this reality pressing against her awareness. It felt wrong. Too thick, too rigid. Like trying to breathe underwater when you were used to open air. Her psionic senses, usually sharp and precise, kept scraping against boundaries that shouldn't exist. This reality had seams, thick ones, and she was trapped on the wrong side. She'd find the way out. She always did. She just hoped the cost wouldn't be more than she could afford to pay. The alert came at dawn, cutting through whatever passed for sleep in a dimension that felt like wearing someone else's skin. Tatsumaki was already awake. Had been for hours, standing at the window of her quarters, watching Krakoa's bioluminescence fade as actual sunlight bled across the horizon. The island's living architecture had tried to adjust her sleep cycle, releasing subtle pheromones meant to induce rest. She'd sealed the vents telekinetically, bending the louvers shut with a thought, until the system gave up. Her communicator, a small device Jean had provided the night before, vibrated against the windowsill. She picked it up already, knowing it wasn't good news. Good news didn't arrive at dawn. Incident in progress. Cyclops' voice came through clipped and military. Manhattan, multiple sentinels, civilian hostages. We're mobilizing now. You're coming with us. Not a request. Not quite an order. Somewhere between which probably represented the limits of his ability to command someone who didn't acknowledge his authority. Tatsumaki was already moving. The Blackbird cut through morning air at speeds that should have shredded conventional aircraft. Inside, the X-Men prepared with the efficiency of people who'd done this too many times to count. Storm checked atmospheric conditions. Jean established telepathic links. Cyclops reviewed tactical data streaming from local authorities. Tatsumaki stood near the rear of the craft, separate from the team's practiced coordination. She didn't need equipment checks or strategy sessions, just a target and clear airspace. Situation overview. Cyclops said, pulling up holographic displays. 4 sentinels materialized in Midtown 20 minutes ago. They've corralled approximately 60 civilians in a plaza between office buildings. No casualties yet, but they're broadcasting demands. What demands? Storm asked. They want Krakoa to surrender the dimensional weapon for international oversight and containment. They're giving us 2 hours. Tatsumaki felt every eye in the craft turn toward her. I'm not surrendering to robots. No one's asking you to, Jean said. But this is clearly a trap. Orcus wants footage of you engaging sentinels near civilians. They're manufacturing a scenario where any action you take can be framed as reckless or dangerous. Then I won't be reckless. I'll be precise. Precision won't matter if they control the cameras. Emma's voice came through the comm system from Krakoa. She'd opted to manage the crisis, remotely coordinating with media contacts and government liaisons. They'll edit whatever they need to create their narrative. You could perform surgery with telekinesis, and they'd make it look like butchery. The Blackbird descended toward a staging area, 6 blocks from the incident. Through the windows, Tatsumaki could see the cordon. Police barriers, news vans, helicopters circling at mandatory distance. And beyond it all, the plaza where machines held people hostage to force a political point. Standard formation, Cyclops said as they landed. Storm your atmospheric control and civilian shield. Jean telepathic sweep for injured or panicking hostages. I'll handle sentinel targeting systems. Tatsumaki close support. We hold position until we confirm the hostages are real. She looked at him. I don't take orders. Then consider it tactical advice, he replied evenly. They're watching for you specifically. Everything about this scenario is designed to force your hand. Then take advice, Jean said before Cyclops could respond. They're watching. Everything we do here will be analyzed, edited, and broadcast. We need to be careful. People are in danger. Careful gets them killed. Reckless gets them killed too, Storm said quietly. Along with our ability to protect anyone else in the future. Please, trust us to know our own battlefield. The plaza came into view as they rounded the final corner. 4 sentinels stood in precise formation, creating a cage of metal and threat around civilians who huddled in the center. Men in business suits, women in running gear. A few teenagers who'd been cutting through on their way to school. All frozen by the simple mathematics of force and fragility. But something felt wrong. Tatsumaki's psionic senses, usually sharp enough to detect cellular structure at range, kept sliding off the scene like trying to grip wet glass. The civilians registered, but faintly. The sentinels were clear as solid, but the people they were supposedly threatening felt thin. Insubstantial. Jean, she said quietly, scan the hostages. Tell me what you're reading. Jean's eyes closed briefly, then opened with confusion evident. That's odd. I'm getting surface thoughts, fear responses, but they're uniform. Too uniform. Like everyone's experiencing the exact same panic in the exact same way. It's not natural. It's broadcast. Like a recording of emotional states being fed into the space. Because they're not real? Tatsumaki said flatly. Hard light projections with psionic noise generators. I can feel the emitters maintaining the illusion. Cyclops turned sharply. Explain. Holograms, projections, something. The psychic signature is wrong. These aren't living people. They're placeholders. Storm's eyes went white as she extended her awareness through atmospheric patterns. There are heat signatures in the plaza, but they're dispersed. Not concentrated the way human bodies should be. More like distributed heating elements maintaining ambient temperature. They're faking it, Jean breathed. The entire hostage scenario is staged. Cyclops was already on comms. Control, we need verification on civilian identities. Cross-reference with traffic cameras, building security, anything that can confirm these people actually entered the plaza. Emma's response came quick and cold. Already running it. Preliminary analysis suggests most of the hostages have no digital trail this morning. No subway cards swiped, no coffee purchases, no phone signals. They appeared in that plaza without arriving there. Pull back! Cyclops ordered the team. This is a setup. They're trying to bait us into attacking fake civilians so they can claim we endangered real ones. But Tatsumaki was already walking forward. Cyclops immediately shifted tactics, hand signals, redirecting the team. Perimeter coverage. She's confirming the fraud. Storm, be ready to shield any real civilians if they appear. Jean keeps scanning for genuine life signs. The X-Men moved into position, adapting to Tatsumaki's action rather than trying to stop it. Professional. Practiced. Accepting that some battles were won by being flexible rather than rigid. The Sentinels reacted immediately to her approach weapon systems, cycling online with mechanical precision. One of them broadcast through external speakers, its voice synthesized and emotionless. Halt. Unauthorized approach detected. Hostages will be terminated if advance continues. Tatsumaki didn't halt. Didn't slow. Just walked across pavement like she was crossing a park, hands loose at her sides, expression bored. Final warning, cease advance or hostages will be eliminated. She stopped 10 feet from the nearest hologram, a middle-aged woman whose fear looked perfect until you noticed she hadn't blinked in 30 seconds. Tatsumaki raised one hand. The Sentinel fired. Energy beams lanced toward her from multiple angles, enough concentrated firepower to vaporize a tank. They stopped 3 feet from her body, frozen in midair. Coherent light bending around an invisible sphere. For a heartbeat, the beams painted the plaza in harsh illumination. Then Tatsumaki closed her fist. Every sentinel in the plaza lifted off the ground simultaneously. Not thrown, gripped. Held by invisible hands that had no interest in gentleness. The machine struggled servos, whining adaptive plating, shifting to compensate for forces they couldn't identify or counter. The surveillance equipment, she said quietly, eyes tracking something the others couldn't see. Within the plaza, I can feel the metal signatures. Circuits humming, they're everywhere. Storm extended her atmospheric awareness, detecting the faint electromagnetic pulses. Confirmed. Micro-drones in the building facades, broadcast nodes in the street fixtures. At least a dozen active feeds. Tatsumaki pulled. A dozen small objects ripped free from their concealment points. Micro-drones disguised as architectural details. Cameras embedded in signage. Broadcast equipment hidden in maintenance panels. They flew toward her like iron filings toward a magnet, clustering in the air above her head. You want footage? She asked no one in particular. Here's your footage. The sentinels compacted. Not crushed into spheres this time. Folded. Like origami executed by someone who found the concept of gentle creasing insulting. Metal bent along impossible angles supports twisting into spirals, weapon systems inverting through their own housings. Within seconds, 4 functional hunter-killers had been reduced to abstract sculptures that vaguely suggested their original form. The surveillance equipment followed, compressed into a single dense mass processors and lenses and broadcast arrays, all reduced to a ball of crushed technology the size of a basketball. Tatsumaki looked up at the news helicopters still circling overhead, at the cameras on distant rooftops, at every lens that thought it was safely beyond her reach. Tell Orcus I found their props. Tell them if they want to manufacture crises, they should use better actors. She released everything. The compacted sentinels fell impacting pavement with sounds like dropped anvils. The surveillance sphere followed, cracking the plaza's decorative stonework. Behind her, the X-Men had formed a perimeter ready to evacuate real civilians if any appeared. None did. The holograms flickered once, twice, then dissipated as whatever system maintaining them gave up or shut down. The plaza was empty. Had been empty the entire time. Just machines and lies and cameras recording everything. Extraction, Cyclops said into comms. Now, before they send reinforcements or actual casualties. But Tatsumaki was looking at something else. One of the compacted sentinels had a component that hadn't fully compressed a crystalline module still glowing faintly with residual energy. She pulled it free from the wreckage, held it up to the light. This, she said, dimensional telemetry beacon. Same signature as the rift that brought me here. Jean moved closer, extending her telepathic senses toward the device. It's routing data somewhere. I'm reading active transmission protocols even after the Sentinel's destruction. This wasn't just for local control. Storm analyzed the energy patterns. Significant power draw. This was maintaining a connection to something much larger, a central hub. They're coordinating from the same facility that opened the rift, Tatsumaki said, fingers closing around the beacon. I can trace it. Jean moved to her side. Are you certain? I can feel the pathway, the communication protocols. Everything routes back to a central point. She turned to Cyclops. You wanted proof that Orcus created the dimensional breach. I can lead you straight to the source. Not alone, Storm said firmly. If Orcus is willing to stage hostage scenarios, they're willing to do worse. This is clearly an escalation designed to draw you out. Then let them. I'll give them exactly what they're expecting. Just not the way they planned. Cyclops studied her for a moment, tactical assessment running behind his visor. We go together. Full team. This isn't a solo mission. I work faster alone, and you're more likely to walk into a kill box alone, he countered. You're powerful. We've established that. But power isn't the same as invulnerability, and Orcus has had time to study your capabilities. They know what you can do, which means they're preparing countermeasures. Tatsumaki wanted to argue. The reflex was automatic, hardwired by years of being the one who handled problems when everyone else failed. But beneath the irritation was something else. Recognition. Cyclops wasn't trying to control her. He was trying to keep people alive, including her. Different motivation, different weight. Fine, she said. But we move fast, before they relocate or scrub evidence. Agreed. Storm Jean, you're with us. Everyone else return to Krakoa and prepare for possible retaliation. Emma, start damage control on the media front. Emma's voice came through sharp and satisfied. Already done. We've sent footage to every major outlet showing the holograms, failing the fake civilians, dissolving the manufactured nature of the entire event. Orcus wanted to make you look reckless. Instead, they've exposed themselves as willing to fabricate hostage situations for propaganda. How long until they counterspin? Cyclops asked. An hour, maybe 2. We've won this round, but Orcus doesn't lose gracefully. They'll frame it as a training exercise, or claim we doctored the footage. The narrative advantage is temporary. We need to use it while we have it. Then we move fast. Cyclops said. Hit them before they can regroup. But Tatsumaki knew victories like this were temporary. Orcus had tried one approach and failed. They'd try another, and another. Keep probing until they found a scenario she couldn't navigate, a trap she couldn't spot, a cost she wasn't willing to pay. The question was what that cost would be. They regrouped at the Blackbird aerial surveillance, confirming no additional threats in the immediate area. Jean pulled up tactical data on potential Orcus facilities within the northeastern corridor, while Tatsumaki held the beacon, using it as a focal point for her psionic senses. Can you trace it? Cyclops asked. She closed her eyes, extending her awareness through the crystalline structure. The beacon was still transmitting, still connected to its source through pathways that bent space in ways this reality's physics didn't naturally allow. Following it felt like tracing a wire through walls you couldn't see. North, she said. Coastal, major power signature. I'm feeling the same dimensional stress pattern as the original rift. Jean cross-referenced electromagnetic data from the beacon's transmission. Signal routing matches known Orcus infrastructure. 3 potential facilities in that corridor. Storm overlaid power consumption data. Westchester Research Station Maritime Laboratory Complex or Hammond Industrial Site. Hammond has anomalous energy readings consistent with dimensional manipulation equipment. Hammond. Tatsumaki confirmed the beacon growing warm in her grip. The connection is strongest there. Multiple dimensional anchors. Active testing. That's your source. Cyclops pulled up satellite imagery of the Hammond facility. A sprawling complex of industrial buildings and research labs, surrounded by high walls and subtle defensive installations. Not overtly militarized, but clearly designed to repel unwanted attention. Security will be substantial, he noted. Orcus knows we're looking for them. They'll have prepared countermeasures. Then we don't knock, Tatsumaki said. We don't negotiate. We arrive, we gather evidence, and we leave before they can mount a coordinated response. Shock and awe, Storm said quietly. Not our usual approach. Your usual approach got you fabricated hostage scenarios, Tatsumaki replied. They're not playing by rules. Neither should you. Jean looked to Cyclops, silently asking for guidance. He studied the facility's layout for a long moment, then nodded. She's right. Orcus is escalating. If we don't hit them hard enough to slow their momentum, they'll keep manufacturing crises until one of them succeeds. We go in fast, document everything, and extract before they can respond effectively. What about civilians? Storm asked. The facility will have staff, security personnel, people who aren't combatants. We avoid casualties, Cyclops said firmly. But we don't let the possibility of collateral damage paralyze us. That's what they're counting on. Our restraint, our unwillingness to accept risk. We need to show them that attacking Krakoa has consequences. The Blackbird turned north, engines pushing toward maximum velocity. Below the coastline, blurred past cities giving way to industrial zones and isolated research facilities. Somewhere ahead, Orcus was preparing whatever came next. Whatever escalation they designed to force Krakoa into an unwinnable position. Tatsumaki stood near the cockpit, watching the horizon approach. She could feel the dimensional signature growing stronger, a beacon that pulled at her awareness like gravity. Somewhere in that facility was the technology that had ripped her from her world. The machinery that had made her Orcus's weapon, whether she agreed or not. They'd used her. Manipulated circumstance to create a threat that justified their existence. That was a mistake she intended to correct. 3 minutes to target, Cyclops announced. Everyone final checks. This is a precision strike. Get in, get evidence, get out. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. We're here to expose Orcus, not start a war. Tatsumaki almost laughed. They'd started this war the moment they opened a rift to drag her across dimensions. Everything since then was just Orcus pretending they hadn't fired the first shot. But she'd make sure everyone remembered who fired the last one. The facility appeared on the horizon, vast and modern and utterly unsuspecting. Orcus had gotten comfortable, confident. They'd manufactured one crisis successfully, staged a second for propaganda value, and assumed the pattern would continue. They were about to learn the difference between controlling a narrative and controlling reality. And Tatsumaki had spent her entire life teaching that particular lesson. The blackbird descended toward the Hammond facility like a hawk spotting prey. And somewhere in the complex below, alarms began to sound. Not warning of attack. Warning that the weapon they'd tried to manufacture had just arrived at their door. Inside the facility's command center, an Orcus operative watched the incoming aircraft and activated a comm channel. Confirm Nimrod deployment authorization. Target has taken the bait. Phase 2 is active. A synthetic voice responded cold and precise. Authorization confirmed. Adaptive countermeasures online. Tornado class anomaly engagement protocols initiated. The operative smiled. The fake hostages had served their purpose. Exposed Orcus publicly, yes. But they'd also given the organization exactly what it needed: confirmation of the target's capabilities, response patterns, and most importantly, her willingness to engage. Next time the hostages wouldn't be fake, and she wouldn't see the difference until it was too late. Outside, Tatsumaki felt nothing of the trap being prepared. She only knew that somewhere in that facility was the technology that had ripped her from her world. The machinery that had made her someone else's crisis. And she wasn't following anyone's script but her own. The problem was that Orcus had stopped writing scripts. They'd started building cages. The Hammond facility didn't look like a weapons lab. That was intentional. Industrial parks rarely did. Just another cluster of modern buildings surrounded by security, fencing the kind of place that processed data or manufactured electronics or performed any of 1,000 mundane corporate functions. Nothing to draw attention, nothing to warrant investigation, except for the dimensional stress fractures radiating from its core like cracks in glass. Tatsumaki felt them before the blackbird descended. Reality here was thinner, worn down by repeated breaches like fabric rubbed too many times in the same spot. Whatever Orcus was doing inside that facility, they'd been doing it often enough to leave scars on space itself. Defensive systems activating. Cyclops reported reading tactical displays. Anti-aircraft batteries, energy shields, automated turrets. They know we're coming. They've been waiting, Jean said quietly. I'm reading minds inside. Technicians, security. But there's something else. Something observing without thinking. Cold, analytical. Tatsumaki knew that sensation. Had felt it before in the plaza. Not human consciousness, not animal awareness. The mechanical assessment of a machine designed to hunt. Nimrod, she said. Storm's expression darkened. You're certain? I can feel it watching. Calculating. It's different from the other sentinels, more focused, more patient. Cyclops adjusted their approach vector. Then we adapt. Nimrod's primary advantage is learning. It studies mutant powers and develops countermeasures in real time. Every ability it encounters makes it stronger against that specific threat. So we don't let it learn, Tatsumaki replied. We don't let it survive, he corrected. Nimrod-class units have distributed backups. Destroying the physical form doesn't always kill the intelligence. We need to disable it completely before it can transmit combat data to Orcus networks. The Blackbird touched down a quarter-mile from the facility landing in an industrial lot that provided both cover and clear sight lines. The team deployed with practiced efficiency, Storm already calling fog to obscure their approach. Jean establishing telepathic coordination to avoid verbal communication, Orcus could intercept. Tatsumaki walked point, her psionic senses extended like radar. The facility's layout became clear through the density of materials, the electromagnetic signatures of equipment, the subtle gravitational variations that suggested underground levels. 3 stories visible above ground, at least 2 below. The dimensional equipment was deep, surrounded by shielding that registered as blank spaces in her awareness. And in the central courtyard, waiting with the patience of something that had no concept of boredom, stood Nimrod. It was humanoid in the way that statues were humanoid. Proportions mathematically correct, but devoid of the small asymmetries that made flesh believable. Its surface shifted constantly, reconfiguring based on sensor input, optimizing for threats it hadn't encountered yet, but had calculated might exist. When it turned toward them, its optical arrays glowed with pale light that suggested neither malice nor mercy. Just analysis. Tornado-class psionic anomaly detected. It announced, voice synthesized to perfect clarity. The designation pulled from Rift telemetry data cataloged when she'd first arrived. Krakoan forces confirmed, engagement protocols active. Initiating countermeasure deployment. Tatsumaki didn't wait for it to finish. She reached out with her telekinesis, gripped the machine's core, and pulled. Nimrod didn't budge, not resisted. Didn't budge. Like trying to lift a mountain or move a planet, the force she'd applied should have torn the machine apart. Instead, it stood exactly where it had been, its self-modifying hull rippling as systems beneath the surface engaged. Psionic dampening field active, analyzing force application vectors, developing adaptive countermeasures. She increased pressure, pushed harder. Felt her telekinesis slam against something that refused to acknowledge the laws of physics she was trying to bend. Not a shield, not resistance. A dead zone. Her grip slipped off Nimrod's surface like trying to hold oil, the psionic force dissipating before it could gain purchase. The machine had created a localized null field canceling her power in the immediate space it occupied. But only that space. It's nullifying her telekinesis. Jean said, alarm creeping into her telepathic voice. Some kind of field generator. I've never seen anything work this efficiently against psionic force. Cyclops moved immediately to support optic blast lancing toward Nimrod's sensor arrays. The beam struck perfectly, energy concentrated enough to melt steel. Nimrod's head tilted, reactive armor shifted, and the blast deflected at an angle that sent it harmlessly into the sky. Energy projection cataloged. Ruby quartz filtration frequency identified. Counter-refraction protocols engaged. It's learning from every attack. Storm called out, lightning gathering in the clouds above. We need to overwhelm it before it adapts to everything. She struck. Lightning descended in a column of ionized fury, enough voltage to power cities channeled into a single devastating impact. Nimrod absorbed it. Plating glowed white-hot for an instant, then cooled as thermal dissipation systems engaged, bleeding the energy into the ground through conductive pathways. Electromagnetic manipulation indexed. Atmospheric ionization patterns recorded. Grounding countermeasures sufficient. The machine took a step forward. Not threatening. Purposeful. Like a scientist approaching a specimen. Tatsumaki felt rage building beneath her frustration. This thing, this collection of circuits and adaptive algorithms, was treating her like data to be collected. Not a threat. Not even an opponent. Just a problem with parameters to be measured and countered. She'd destroyed armies, leveled cities of enemies, fought catastrophes that would crack this world's mind just witnessing them. And this machine was studying her like she was homework. Spread out, Cyclops ordered. Make it divide its attention. If it can only adapt to threats, it's actively tracking. We hit it from angles it can't cover simultaneously. The team scattered Jean, moving to flank while Storm circled for aerial advantage. Cyclops positioned himself with clear sight lines for sustained fire. Professional. Tactical. Fighting a machine with machine-like precision, Tatsumaki stood her ground and changed approaches. If direct force was to be canceled, she'd use indirect applications. The courtyard beneath Nimrod's feet was concrete over soil. She gripped the substrate, not the machine, and pulled the earth out from under it. Nimrod dropped 3 feet as the ground disappeared. then immediately compensated with vertical thrusters hovering above the crater she had created. But for that instant, it had been off-balance systems, engaged with maintaining position rather than threat assessment. Cyclops fired into the gap, his beam catching Nimrod's torso before its plating could optimize. The impact left a scorch mark, actual damage, minor but real. Gravitational manipulation indirect. Environmental alteration tactics noted. Stabilization protocols enhanced. It was learning. Every second, every technique. Building a database of how they fought, how they thought how to kill them efficiently. Jean struck telepathically, not trying to control the machine, but attempting to disrupt its sensor networks. She couldn't read a machine's mind, but she could target the patterns it used to interpret data. Flood its recognition algorithms with contradictory information. Create false positives in its threat assessment. For a moment, Nimrod's movements stuttered optical arrays, flickering as processing cycles fought through manufactured noise. Psionic intrusion detected. Pattern recognition interference. Network partitioning engaged. Cognitive warfare protocols active. The stutter ended. Nimrod raised one arm, and from its palm, a pulse of electromagnetic interference erupted. Zhang gasped her telepathic coordination with the team fragmenting as the pulse disrupted her concentration. "It's adapting faster than we can innovate," she said aloud, forced back to verbal communication. "Every strategy we try, it counters within seconds." Storm descended with winds strong enough to shear metal, creating a vortex that should have torn Nimrod apart through pure atmospheric pressure. The machine anchored itself, mass increasing impossibly as internal systems engaged, making it dense enough to resist the pull. Atmospheric manipulation threshold cataloged. Mass anchoring sufficient. Proceeding to offensive response. Nimrod's plating opened, revealing weapon systems that targeted each X-Man with specific precision. Energy signatures matched to counter their abilities. Cyclops got coherent light at frequencies designed to overwhelm his visor's filtration. Storm received electromagnetic pulses to disrupt her neural connection to weather patterns. Jean faced narrowband telepathic static. They scattered, taking cover behind debris and building corners, forced into defensive positions by a machine that had studied them for less than 3 minutes and already knew how to kill them. Tatsumaki felt something she rarely experienced. Not fear, not doubt, but the recognition that standard approaches weren't working. Nimrod had been designed specifically to counter enhanced individuals. Every move she made taught it how to beat her. Every trick revealed vulnerabilities it could exploit. So she stopped being predictable. Instead of attacking Nimrod, she attacked the facility, reached out with her telekinesis, and gripped the building behind the machine pulling. Not the whole structure, just the support columns, just the load-bearing elements. Just enough to make tons of steel and concrete begin collapsing. Nimrod detected the structural failure, calculated trajectories, determined the falling debris posed no threat to its position. Dismissed it. That was a mistake. Tatsumaki caught the debris mid-fall and turned it into projectiles. Chunks of concrete the size of cars accelerated to velocities that made them kinetic missiles. Not aimed at Nimrod directly, aimed at the space it would need to occupy to avoid the previous trajectory. Chess, not checkers. Not hitting where it was, but where it would have to be. The first impact caught Nimrod mid-dodge, concrete shattering against its adaptive plating, but transferring enough kinetic force to knock it sideways. The second struck before it could compensate, and the third drove it into the ground with impact that cratered pavement. Trajectory prediction insufficient. Multi-vector kinetic assault parameters require recalculation. But Tatsumaki wasn't giving it time to recalculate. She buried it, pulled earth and rubble and broken building over the machine in layers, compacting them with pressure that turned loose debris into compressed sediment. Not crushing Nimrod, entombing it, making it waste processing power on digging out instead of adapting to attack. Cyclops saw the opening she'd created. Storm containment. Gene, see if you can find its communication uplink. We need to stop it from transmitting what it's learned. Storm pulled moisture from the air, flash freezing it around the debris pile, adding ice to Earth as additional binding. Jean extended her telepathic senses, searching for the electromagnetic signature of active transmission. It's sending data in bursts, she reported. Compressed packets. I can't block them entirely, but I can corrupt some of the transmission, make the data incomplete. The implications hit immediately. Every move they made, every technique Tatsumaki revealed, was being broadcast to other Nimrod units. Building a comprehensive combat profile. Do it, Cyclops ordered. Corrupt as much as you can. Every gap in their data is an advantage we might need later. Beneath the makeshift tomb, Nimrod continued calculating. The debris wasn't permanent. The ice was temporary. But it had learned something valuable. This opponent didn't fight like mutants, didn't rely on a single ability or predictable pattern. She adapted as quickly as it did, changing tactics before it could develop perfect counters. That made her dangerous. Tornado-class anomaly reclassified. Threat level Omega. Current containment temporary. Recommendation strategic withdrawal and comprehensive analysis required before re-engagement. For the first time since the battle began, Nimrod made a choice that wasn't about immediate threat response. It burrowed, used directed energy beams to carve through earth and concrete, creating an escape tunnel deeper into the facility rather than fighting through the surface barrier. Tatsumaki felt it retreating and moved to follow. "Wait," Cyclops said. "That could be exactly what it wants. Lead you into prepared defenses. Make you the one fighting on its terms." She hesitated. Hated hesitating. But he wasn't wrong. Nimrod had demonstrated frightening adaptability in open combat. In a controlled environment, surrounded by technology designed to counter her, specifically, the advantage would shift entirely. "Then we don't chase it," she said. "We take what we came for." "The dimensional equipment," Jean confirmed. "It should be in the sub-level labs. If we can document Orcus's rift technology, prove they created the initial breach. We prove this whole crisis was manufactured," Cyclops finished. "That's worth more than destroying one sentinel." Storm descended, her winds dispersing as she landed beside them. "The facility's defensive systems are still active. We'll face automated resistance the deeper we go." "Let them try," Tatsumaki said. They breached the facility's entrance with systematic efficiency. Cyclops disabled security systems with precisely aimed optic blasts. Storm used atmospheric pressure to bend blast doors that had been designed to withstand explosives. Jean cleared each room telepathically, ensuring no ambushes waited. And Tatsumaki walked through it all like a natural disaster with purpose, any automated defenses that activated finding themselves crumpled or crushed or simply removed from existence before they could fire a shot. The sub-level labs were exactly what Jean's intelligence suggested. Vast chambers filled with equipment that hurt to look at directly, technology that bent light and warped perception just by existing. Dimensional rift generators, stabilization arrays, massive power cores feeding energy into machinery designed to tear holes between realities. "This is it," Jean breathed. "This is what brought you here. The signature matches perfectly." Tatsumaki approached the primary generator, feeling the dimensional stress it created just sitting dormant. This machine had reached across whatever separated her world from this one and pulled her through. Orcus had done it deliberately, creating a crisis to justify their existence. She wanted to destroy it, wanted to reduce every component to scrap, make it impossible for them to ever reach across dimensions again. But Cyclops was already recording everything, his visor capturing video and technical specifications. "We need this intact as evidence. If we destroy it, Orcus claims we're covering up our own weapons program. If we document it, prove it's theirs, prove they used it. We make them the villains instead of us," Storm finished. Tatsumaki looked at the machinery that had stolen her from her sister, at the technology that had made her a pawn in someone else's war, at the evidence that would prove Krakoa's innocence at the cost of her revenge. take your evidence, she said finally. But when this is done, when you've proven whatever you need to prove, this facility stops existing. Agreed, Cyclops said. Jean moved through the lab using her telepathy to extract data from computer systems, downloading schematics and project files and communications that detailed exactly what Orcus had done. The dimensional breach. The Sentinel deployment. The manufactured hostage scenario. All of it documented. All of it evidence. This is enough, she said. We have everything we need to prove. Alarms cut through her words. Not facility alarms. Cyclops' communicator receiving an emergency transmission from Krakoa. Emma's voice came through sharp with urgency. We have a situation. A Nimrod unit just appeared on news broadcasts. Washington, D.C. It manifested without warning, as if it had been positioned there all along. And it's demanding Krakoa surrender the dimensional terrorist, or it will begin eliminating government officials, 1 per hour, until we comply. The bottom dropped out of the tactical victory they'd just achieved. A different unit, Jean said immediately, scanning the facility. The one we fought is still here dormant in the sublevel. This is coordinated. Multiple bodies, single intelligence. Distributed architecture, Cyclops said grimly. Nimrod learned from our fight here and transmitted that data to other platforms. The DC unit already knows everything we tried. It's using hostages, Storm said, horror evident. Real ones this time. Tatsumaki felt rage crystallize into something colder. Clearer. Nimrod had learned from the plaza. Learned that fake victims weren't effective. So it had found real ones. People whose deaths would matter. People whose blood would be on her hands if she didn't surrender. How long? She asked. 58 minutes, Emma replied. Then it kills the Secretary of Defense on live television. Cyclops looked at Tatsumaki calculating angles and velocities behind ruby quartz. We can't get there in time. Not from here. Not even with the Blackbird at maximum speed. You can't, Tatsumaki said. I can. You'll be walking into exactly the scenario at once. Controlled environment, live cameras, everything designed to make you look like the aggressor while it plays protector. I know. It'll have adapted to everything we tried here, developed counters. It'll be ready for you specifically. I know. You could die. Tatsumaki looked at him with eyes that had seen too much to fear death. People will die if I don't go. Real people. That's not acceptable. Jean moved to her side. We're coming with you. You won't get there fast enough. Then we'll catch up. You hold it until we arrive. Together we can... Together you'll give it more data to learn from. Tatsumaki interrupted. More abilities to counter. More ways to beat you. I'm going alone because alone means it only adapts to me. And I'm betting I can change faster than it can learn. Storm's expression was troubled. This is what Orcus wants. You isolated fighting a machine designed to kill you, broadcast to the world as the aggressor. I don't care what they call me. Tatsumaki replied, her voice flat and cold. I care who dies because of it. She didn't wait for permission or approval. Didn't ask for strategy or support. Just turned and walked out of the lab, back through the facility, back to open air where nothing would slow her down. Cyclops watched her go. Every tactical instinct screaming to maintain unit cohesion, to never let variables run unsupervised. But the clock had teeth, and 58 minutes wasn't enough time to argue with someone who'd already made her choice. Behind her, the X-Men scrambled to follow, to support, to somehow prevent the disaster they all felt approaching. But Tatsumaki was already gone, accelerating into the sky like a missile, with a conscience heading toward Washington, D.C., and the machine that had learned to use human lives as leverage. Nimrod had adapted to her fighting style. Now she'd teach it about desperation. And desperation, she'd learned long ago, was just anger with a deadline. Washington, D.C. looked different from above. Not the monument-studded tourist destination or the political theater of news broadcasts. From this altitude, accelerating through thin air at speeds that turned wind into solid force, the city was a grid of power and vulnerability, buildings that housed decisions affecting millions, streets where policy became reality. And somewhere in that geometry of influence, a machine was counting down to murder. Tatsumaki descended like a meteor with a conscience decelerating only enough to avoid sonic boom damage to the structures below. The National Mall spread beneath her monuments, catching late afternoon sun. She could feel Nimrod before she saw it, a void in her psionic awareness where something powerful and profoundly wrong occupied space. The Lincoln Memorial, of course. Orcus had a sense of theater. Nimrod stood on the steps, perfectly positioned for maximum camera coverage. News helicopters circled at mandated distance. Ground crews had established perimeter barriers. And arranged in precise formation at Nimrod's feet, hands bound with adaptive restraints, knelt 6 government officials. She recognized the Secretary of Defense from news footage. The others were unfamiliar but clearly important based on the media attention and military presence. This wasn't the Hammond platform. Different shell. Same distributed intelligence. Same cold analytical presence that registered as void in her psionic awareness. Real hostages this time. Real lives. Real consequences if she made a single mistake. Tornado-class anomaly arrival confirmed. Nimrod announced its voice, carrying across the mall with artificial clarity. Threat assessment updated based on Hammond facility engagement data, countermeasures optimized. It knew everything she'd tried. Every technique, every tactical adjustment. The Hammond unit had transmitted comprehensive combat data before retreating, and this platform had spent the flight time analyzing, adapting, preparing counters for approaches she hadn't even attempted yet. Tatsumaki landed 50 feet from the memorial steps, placing herself between Nimrod and the gathered crowd. Military personnel had weapons trained on both of them, uncertain which represented the greater threat. She ignored them, ignored the cameras, ignored everything except the machine and the people it was using as leverage. "Let them go," she said. "Negative. Hostages represent deterrent against uncontrolled psionic assault. Surrender for international oversight or first termination occurs in..." It paused optical sensor cycling, 42 minutes. She could feel the null field already active around Nimrod, the same localized dead zone that had frustrated her direct attacks at Hammond. Trying to grip it telekinetically would be like grabbing smoke. But the field had limits. It protected Nimrod, not the environment, not the hostages. That was both opportunity and trap. Any environmental attack risked collateral damage. Any precise extraction of hostages would expose her to Nimrod's weaponry. And the machine knew it. Had calculated every variable, every angle, every choice she might make, and prepared counters for all of them. "You learned from our fight," Tatsumaki said, moving slowly to the side, watching Nimrod track her movement with mechanical precision. "Good, so did I." So, she struck without warning, without buildup, without telegraphing intent. But not at Nimrod, at the memorial's surrounding infrastructure. Gripped the massive stone steps and barriers, the scaffolding from recent maintenance work, chunks of marble pavement, and pulled. Stone cracked, metal shrieked. Hundreds of tons of material lifted into the air, then collapsed toward Nimrod and the hostages in a controlled avalanche. Not enough to destroy Lincoln's monument, but enough to bury everything on the steps beneath crushing weight. Nimrod's response was immediate. It shifted, reinforcing its null field into a physical barrier, a dome of force that caught the falling debris before it could crush anyone. Protecting the hostages. Protecting itself. Exactly as she'd calculated it would. While it was occupied holding up debris, Tatsumaki pulled the hostages. All 6 lifted smoothly from their kneeling positions, yanked backward through the air with carefully controlled force. The restraints binding their hands cracked under psionic pressure adaptive materials designed to counter mutant physiology and strength, but never tested against telekinetic torque applied from outside the body. Within 2 seconds, they'd cleared Nimrod's effective range, deposited behind military lines, where trained personnel immediately moved them to safety. "Hostage control lost," Nimrod stated almost conversationally. "Revised tactical assessment Tornado class demonstrates superior environmental manipulation and predictive modeling. Previous deterrent strategies insufficient." The dome holding up the debris collapsed. Stone and steel crashed down onto the steps, dust billowing across the National Mall. When it cleared, Nimrod stood in the center of the wreckage, completely undamaged. Its reconfiguring surface already adapting to what it had learned from the exchange. Commencing direct engagement, objective capture or disable for Orcus analysis. It moved faster than the Hammond unit had. Learned from that encounter, too. Recognized that giving her time to think, to adapt, to choose her angle of attack was a disadvantage. Speed closed tactical windows, prevented planning. Energy weapons deployed from concealed housings, firing concentrated beams at frequencies specifically calibrated to disrupt psionic activity. Not magic. Technology. Electromagnetic interference patterns designed to create harmonic noise in the neural pathways. Telekinesis required scrambling the disciplined focus her power demanded. Tatsumaki's force field caught them, but the impact felt wrong. Not painful. Disorienting. Like static in her awareness interference patterns designed to degrade concentration through systematic disruption. She pushed through it, grabbed chunks of the destroyed memorial, and turned them into projectiles. Nimrod dodged with calculated precision, each movement minimal and efficient, wasting no energy on unnecessary evasion. Its combat algorithms had improved. It wasn't just learning her patterns. It was learning how to learn faster. They fought across the National Mall, a running battle that left destruction in its wake. Tatsumaki used everything she could reach as weapons. Benches torn from concrete. Streetlights bent into spears. The reflecting pool itself, water pulled into crushing spheres, hurled at velocities that made them solid as stone. Nimrod countered each attack with methodical efficiency, its distributed intelligence processing hundreds of variables per second, adapting defenses in real time, returning fire with weapons specifically tuned to exploit the gaps in her force field. And it was winning, not dramatically, not obviously, but incrementally. Each exchange left Tatsumaki slightly more drained, slightly more exposed. The psionic disruptor beams were cumulative, building interference in her concentration like static on a radio frequency. Her attacks were becoming less precise, her reactions slower. The machine was grinding her down through systematic pressure. 41 minutes had become 37. Somewhere the X-Men were racing to reach DC. But even the Blackbird needed time to cover distance. She was alone, fighting an enemy that learned from every move she made, surrounded by cameras broadcasting her struggle to millions, and slowly, inevitably losing. Then something changed, not in the battle, in her awareness. A sensation like electricity running along her nerves, but warm instead of painful. Familiar in a way she couldn't place. Her telekinesis surged, suddenly stronger, clearer, as if someone had removed a filter she hadn't known was there. Hope Summers' voice came through the Krakoan comm seed Jean had embedded in her collar before she'd left Hammond, small and urgent. "I'm establishing a circuit. It's going to feel strange. Don't fight it. Let the amplification flow." "What?" No time to explain. "Just trust me for the next 60 seconds. The surge intensified. Tatsumaki felt other presences in her awareness, not intruding, but supporting. Mutant powers she didn't understand channeled through Hope's unique gift, creating a lattice of energy that her telekinesis could draw from. Not her power being amplified. The framework supporting it. like upgrading from muscle to hydraulics. Same control, vastly greater capacity. The sensation was both exhilarating and terrifying. This wasn't her strength, wasn't something she'd earned or trained. It was borrowed power, temporary, dependent on people she didn't fully trust, maintaining a connection she didn't understand. But it was also exactly what she needed. Nimrod detected the change immediately. Energy signature alteration detected. External amplification source identified. Analyzing. Tatsumaki didn't let it finish. She reached out with telekinesis, enhanced beyond anything she'd managed solo, and gripped the space around Nimrod. Not folding dimensions, compressing them. The air, the electromagnetic fields, the gravitational gradients, all crushed into a cage so dense that Nimrod's null field couldn't define its edges. The circuit provided the stability lattice, preventing the compression from tearing reality apart, channeling the force into controlled containment rather than catastrophic spatial collapse. The machine struggled, trying to adapt to conditions where the very framework it used to calculate responses had been compressed into uselessness. Its surface flickered, systems fighting to reconfigure for forces that weren't attacking it directly, but strangling the space it needed to exist in. Dimensional stress detected. Spatial integrity compromised. Counter. She compressed further. The pocket of twisted space contracted around Nimrod like a fist, crushing without touching, destroying without direct force. The machine's hull cracked. Its weaponry failed. The distributed intelligence controlling it tried desperately to escape to transmit itself to other platforms, but the dimensional fold blocked even electromagnetic signals. For 5 seconds, Tatsumaki held absolute advantage. Complete superiority, the kind of overwhelming force that made resistance meaningless. Then Hope's voice came again, strained now, urgent. "Circuit's breaking, I can't hold it. 30 seconds. 29, 28. The countdown was a countdown to vulnerability. To being alone again against an enemy that had just learned she could do this. That would adapt. Prepare counters, make sure she never got this chance again. Tatsumaki made a choice. Instead of destroying Nimrod, she threw it. Used every ounce of the amplified power to hurl the machine straight up on an escape trajectory out of Earth's orbit, entirely spinning it end over end to scramble its orientation systems and freeze its communication arrays before they could transmit location data. Not permanent elimination, but removal. Temporary victory that bought time and denied Orcus easy recovery of their combat data. The circuit collapsed. The supporting lattice vanished. Tatsumaki dropped to one knee as her telekinesis returned to normal levels, the sudden absence of amplification hitting like exhaustion after a marathon. Around her, the National Mall looked like a war zone. Destroyed monuments, cratered earth, debris scattered across acres, but no casualties, no deaths. The hostages were safe. The machine was gone. And she was still conscious, still standing still, capable of finishing what needed finishing. Military personnel approached cautiously, weapons lowered, but ready. News cameras captured everything. And somewhere in Orcus, command center's analysts were reviewing footage of what she'd just done, calculating how to counter it, planning the next escalation. The Blackbird landed on the mall 60 seconds later. Storm already calling winds to disperse the dust, Jean extending telepathic calm to the gathered crowds. Cyclops emerged first, surveying the destruction with the expression of someone running damage calculations. Hope Summers followed, visibly exhausted, supported by another X-Man. Blood traced a thin line from her nose, her hands trembling with the aftershocks of channeling forces she wasn't designed to contain. She looked at Tatsumaki with something between respect and concern. That was close. The circuit almost collapsed 30 seconds early. If it had... It didn't, Tatsumaki interrupted. You held it long enough. Barely. Next time might not be possible. The strain on the supporting mutants was extreme. We can't sustain that kind of amplification repeatedly without causing permanent damage. Cyclops moved between them, his focus tactical as always. Did you destroy it? Removed it. Space. It's still functional but offline until Orcus can retrieve it. She straightened, pushing away the fatigue. They'll adapt. Build counters for what I just did. The circuit advantage is temporary. All advantages are temporary, he replied. What matters is we use this one while we have it. The evidence we gathered at Hammond combined with this public demonstration that Nimrod was targeting government officials gives us leverage. Orcus can't frame you as the aggressor when everyone just watched you save the Secretary of Defense on live television. Emma's voice came through the comm system, sharp with satisfaction. The narrative is shifting. Images of you protecting hostages are already trending above the destruction footage. Orcus tried to manufacture a terrorist incident, and you turned it into a rescue operation. For the first time since the gala, public opinion is moving in our favor. Tatsumaki barely heard her. The borrowed strength was gone, leaving her with normal capabilities and the knowledge that she'd needed help. That alone hadn't been enough. The realization sat like lead in her stomach. Jean approached quietly, her presence gentle even when uninvited. You did well. Accepting support doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart. It makes me dependent, Tatsumaki corrected. What happens when that circuit isn't available? When hope can't reach me, or the supporting mutants are compromised, I fight at reduced capacity against an enemy that studied me at enhanced levels. Then we make sure you're not fighting alone, Cyclops said firmly. This isn't your war to fight solo. It never was. Orcus made it everyone's problem when they opened that rift. She wanted to argue. Wanted to insist on self-sufficiency, on the certainty that came from relying on nothing but her own strength. But the words wouldn't come, because beneath the instinctive rejection was a question she didn't want to examine too closely. What if being alone wasn't strength? What if it was just familiar? Storm landed beside them, wind settling to calm as her eyes returned to normal. We need to move. Military Command is requesting a debrief. The State Department wants assurances. And there are approximately 47 different agencies that want to know what just happened and how to classify it. Tell them the truth, Tatsumaki said, surprising herself. Orcus staged a hostage situation. I stopped it. Everything else is details. Details matter in politics, Emma's voice reminded her. But we can work with this. Hope, how recoverable are the supporting mutants? Hope's response was cautious. Exhausted, but stable. We'll need at least 48 hours before attempting another amplification of that magnitude. And even then, I can't guarantee the circuit will hold as long. The dimensional folding you did, Tatsumaki, it pushed the framework beyond designed parameters, because it wasn't designed for me. Tatsumaki said quietly. Your system works with mutant powers. Mine isn't the same. Doesn't integrate cleanly. No, Hope agreed. But it worked. Imperfectly. Dangerously. But it worked when we needed it to. That counts for something. Cyclops was already coordinating with Krakoa, establishing secure communication protocols, arranging transport back to the island, where they could debrief properly, without government oversight. The practiced efficiency of a team that had weathered countless crises. Everyone knowing their role. Everyone contributing to a coordinated response. Tatsumaki stood apart from it, watching the organized chaos with the detachment of someone who'd always worked alone. But for the first time since arriving in this world, that distance felt less like strength and more like habit. You coming? Jean asked, noticing her hesitation. Tatsumaki looked at the destroyed memorial, at the saved hostages being interviewed by news crews, at the space where Nimrod had stood before she'd launched it into orbit. Evidence of what she could do. What she'd needed help to achieve. Yeah, she said finally. I'm coming. The flight back to Krakoa was quiet. Hope slept, immediately drained from maintaining the circuit. Storm piloted, allowing Cyclops and Jean to analyze tactical data. And Tatsumaki sat near the rear of the Blackbird, processing what had just happened. The amplification had been intoxicating. Power beyond anything she'd achieved solo. The ability to fold space itself, to make physics irrelevant, to fight on a level that made even Nimrod's adaptive protocols meaningless. For those seconds, she'd been unstoppable. And then it had ended. Left her normal again. Capable but not invincible. Strong but not sufficient. The contrast was jarring, like going from flight to walking, both functional, one infinitely more limited. Cyclops approached, settling into the seat across from her. "You're thinking about the circuit." Not a question, an observation. She didn't confirm or deny, just waited for wherever he was going with this. "It's a powerful tool," he continued, "but it's not a solution. Hope can amplify, she can coordinate, but she can't create power that doesn't exist. What you did today, folding dimensional space that came from you. She just gave you the framework to express it more fully. And when I don't have that framework, then you adapt. Same as always. Use what you have. Find angles that don't require overwhelming force. Fight smarter instead of harder." He paused. "Or you accept that some battles require more than one person. That teamwork isn't weakness. It's multiplying strengths while covering weaknesses." Tatsumaki looked at him at the visor that hid eyes, but not intent. "You trust your team. With my life, daily. I've never had a team. You do now, if you want it." The offer hung there, simple and complicated. Accept partnership. Accept dependence. Accept that maybe, just maybe, being alone was a choice rather than a necessity. She didn't answer. Couldn't. The words were there, but the commitment they required wasn't. Not yet. Outside the Blackbird, the sun set over a country that had just watched her fight a machine on their capital grounds. Half would call her hero, half would call her threat. And Orcus would use both reactions to fuel their next move. But for now, in this moment, flying back to an island nation that had offered her sanctuary despite the chaos she'd brought, Tatsumaki allowed herself to sit with the uncomfortable reality that she was tired. Not physically. That would pass. But tired of fighting alone. Tired of being the last line of defense. Tired of the weight that came from believing no one else could be trusted with what mattered. Her sister would laugh if she could see this. Fubuki had spent years trying to convince her that having allies wasn't weakness. That letting people in didn't mean giving up control. Maybe she'd been right. Tatsumaki closed her eyes, feeling the Blackbird's engines vibrating through the hull, and for the first time since arriving in this dimension, let herself rest without keeping every defense raised. Just for a moment, just to see what it felt like. The answer surprised her. It felt like relief. She hated how unfamiliar that was, but she'd learned to live with it. The window between victories was always smaller than it seemed. 24 hours after Washington, D.C., Orcus had already begun their counter-narrative. News cycles that briefly favored Krakoa were flooded with expert panels debating dimensional weapons, unauthorized, superpowered interventions, and whether saving government officials justified the destruction left behind. The footage was analyzed frame by frame. Every broken barrier, every cratered street, every piece of evidence that could be spun as recklessness. But Orcus had made a mistake. In their rush to manufacture crises, they'd left breadcrumbs, digital signatures, power consumption patterns, and most damning, the dimensional equipment at Hammond that Jean had documented in excruciating detail. Cyclops stood in the quiet council chamber, holographic displays floating around him, showing technical schematics, energy readings, and communication intercepts. "We have 48 hours, maybe less. That's how long it'll take Orcus to develop counters for the spatial compression Tatsumaki used in DC. Once they adapt, our tactical advantage evaporates. Emma leaned forward, her expression calculating. And you want to use that window to hit them where it hurts. The forge, he confirmed. The facility producing mother mold components and Nimrod platforms. It's not just a weapons lab, it's the heart of their dimensional breach capability. Destroy it, and we cut off their ability to stage future incidents. Magneto's voice carried weight, even when quiet. A military strike that Orcus will frame as an attack on civilian infrastructure. The optics will be catastrophic. The optics are already catastrophic, Storm countered. Orcus has positioned us as the aggressors regardless of our actions. At least this way, we remove their ability to manufacture threats. Professor Xavier studied the schematics with the expression of someone calculating acceptable losses. The facility will be defended, heavily. Orcus knows we have their location. They'll be prepared. Tatsumaki, standing near the chamber's edge, as always spoke for the first time. Then we don't give them time to prepare. We hit them now, tonight, before they finish adapting. Agreed, Cyclops said. Full strike team. Tatsumaki leads the assault on the Forge's production levels. Storm handles atmospheric coverage and evacuation of non-combatants. Jean disrupts their communication networks. I coordinate tactical response. We disable the facility, extract evidence of their dimensional weapons program, and withdraw before they can mount effective resistance. And Mother Mold? Jean asked quietly. Everyone in the chamber knew what she was really asking. The AI that had orchestrated Genosha's destruction. The template for Nimrod's evolution. The thing that represented existential threat, not just to Krakoa, but to mutant existence itself. We make sure it never produces another Sentinel, Cyclops said. His tone allowed no room for debate. The Forge hung in decaying orbit disguised as a commercial satellite platform. Modular shell panels and radar cross-section spoofing made it read as a telecommunications array from ground-based tracking. That disguise had worked for months. Would have continued working if Orcus hadn't been arrogant enough to route their dimensional breach equipment through the same power grid, and arrogant enough to think the X-Men wouldn't notice when they quietly initiated the deorbit sequence hours ago. The platform wasn't in stable orbit anymore. Orcus had preloaded deorbit protocols weeks ago, a contingency plan, waiting for the right catastrophe to justify its deployment. Now approaching in a stealth-configured Blackbird, the X-Men could see it for what it truly was. Not a research station, a factory. Producing hatred, one adaptive platform at a time. And already falling just slowly enough that Orcus could claim it was a tragic accident when it struck. Defensive systems activating, Barshamrathiping, Storm reported. They know we're here. Expected, Cyclops replied. Tatsumaki, you're up. Clear us a path. She didn't respond verbally, just extended her awareness toward the Forge's hull. Feeling for structural weaknesses, power conduits, anything she could exploit. The station's armor was impressive. Military-grade alloys designed to withstand micrometeorite impacts and weapons fire. It wasn't designed to withstand someone who could grip individual molecules and pull. Tatsumaki found a seam where hull plates joined, grabbed both sides, and tore. Inside the pressurized sections, the stress of separation at that scale created vibrations that transmitted through the station's entire structure. Metal screamed. Not figuratively. The sound wave traveled through atmosphere-filled corridors, a shriek of tortured alloys that every sensor aboard would register as catastrophic damage. The Blackbird shot through the gap before automated repair systems could engage Jean's telepathy, guiding them past interior defenses that hadn't expected intruders to arrive from that angle. They docked in a maintenance bay, bypassing the main airlocks entirely. 6 minutes until Orcus can lock down the production ring and deploy hard countermeasures, Cyclops announced. Make them count. The team deployed with practiced speed. Storm immediately established atmospheric control using air pressure to seal doors and create clear corridors for evacuation. Jean extended her telepathic net, identifying minds in the facility, separating combatants from support staff, guiding non-threats toward escape routes. And Tatsumaki went hunting. The production levels were vast. Assembly lines stretching the length of football fields, robotic arms, constructing sentinel components with precision that made human manufacturing look crude by comparison. She could see Nimrod chassis in various stages of completion, adaptive plating being installed, layer by layer weapon systems calibrated to frequencies designed to kill specific mutants. It was efficient, industrial, and utterly obscene. She started dismantling it, not destroying, dismantling. Pulling apart assembly lines, piece by piece, careful to avoid explosions that might kill the technicians Jean was evacuating. Robotic arms twisted into abstract sculptures, conveyor systems compressed into dense cubes, manufacturing equipment reduced to components that would never assemble anything again. An alarm shrieked. Automated defenses activated turrets emerging from concealed housings. They targeted her with the kind of precision that suggested significant processing power, calculating firing solutions. The turrets crumpled before they could fire, gripped by telekinetic force, and compressed until their barrels looked like crushed soda cans. Tatsumaki moved through the production floor like weather, unstoppable and unconcerned with anything that tried to impede her progress. "Security forces converging on your position." Jean's voice came through the comm. "They're carrying psionic dampeners, military grade, the kind that worked on you at Hammond. Let them come." She meant it. The dampeners created localized null zones, made direct telekinetic manipulation difficult. But they didn't stop her from affecting everything around their source. And in a manufacturing facility, everything around included a lot of very heavy, very dangerous equipment. The security team rounded a corner. Dampeners activated, weapons raised. Tatsumaki didn't try to grip them directly. She gripped the assembly line behind them and pulled it forward like a landslide of industrial machinery. Tons of equipment crashed toward them, forcing them to scatter or be crushed. Those who scattered found themselves trapped by bent support beams and twisted scaffolding. Those who stood their ground discovered that dampeners didn't make you immune to being buried under manufacturing equipment. No casualties. Just a lot of very uncomfortable people waiting for rescue crews that wouldn't arrive until after the X-Men had left. "Production level secure," she reported, moving to core systems. The forge's central chamber housed mother mold, not the AI itself. That existed in distributed networks, impossible to destroy with conventional means. But the infrastructure supporting it, the quantum processors, the dimensional anchors, the power cores feeding energy into systems designed to calculate genocide with mathematical precision. Tatsumaki stood at the entrance to the chamber, feeling the wrongness radiating from within. This place had planned Genosha, had orchestrated the deaths of millions, had looked at mutant existence and decided it was a problem requiring industrial solutions. She walked in ready to end it. Mother Mold spoke first. Not through speakers. Through every screen, every display, every surface capable of conveying information. Text scrolling at speeds meant to overwhelm a wall of words that still somehow felt like a voice. Tornado-class anomaly. Your dimensional signature indicates origin outside local reality framework. Probability calculations suggest 94.7% chance. You represent unintended consequence of Orca's Rift technology testing. You were not supposed to exist here. Tatsumaki looked at the text and felt something cold settle in her chest. You're saying you brought me here by accident? Affirmative. Dimensional breach at Hellfire Gala was intended as controlled demonstration. Orca's calculated extraction of specific dimensional sample for study. Controlled asset. Manageable threat. Your arrival was statistical anomaly. Probability deviation outside acceptable parameters. Extraction protocols targeted specific energy signature. received incompatible consciousness instead. Low probability event that occurred despite calculated safeguards. Orcas adapted circumstances to their advantage. This unit merely observed. You're lying. Negative. This unit does not lie. Lying is inefficient. Omission is optimal. Selective truth serves calculation better than deception. Your presence has altered calculation significantly. Krakoa now possesses Omega-class asset with no genetic markers connecting her to mutant taxonomy. You are weapon they cannot be blamed for creating. The screens flickered, displaying footage. Tatsumaki at the gala. Crushing sentinels. The DC rescue. Every moment of power caught on camera and analyzed frame by frame. Your existence makes mutant extinction harder to justify. Public opinion shifts when heroes lack clear genetic classification. Orca's narrative requires mutants to be specific threat. You introduce variables that complicate messaging. This unit calculates. You have increased mutant survival probability by 12.4% across near-term timelines. 90-day projection window. And you're telling me this why? Tatsumaki asked, circling the chamber, looking for the physical infrastructure she could actually destroy. Because this unit also calculates that destroying Forge infrastructure will delay but not prevent Sentinel production. Orcas has distributed manufacturing, backup facilities, redundant systems. You cannot win by attacking factories. You win by changing the equation. I'm not here for philosophy lectures from a genocidal calculator. Understood. Then proceed with destruction. It will make you feel effective. That emotional satisfaction is quantifiable, but it will not change outcome probabilities. Mutant extinction remains viable scenario across 47.3% of calculated future branches. Tatsumaki found the primary power core, a massive cylindrical structure feeding energy to Mother Mold's processors. Shielded, hardened, designed to survive attacks. She gripped it anyway. The shields held for approximately 3 seconds. Then Tatsumaki increased pressure, found the resonant frequency where shields became brittle instead of flexible, and shattered them like glass. The power core beneath was exposed vulnerable and absolutely critical to Mother Mold's operations. Fascinating. Your telekinetic manipulation operates at quantum scales, adjusting vibrational frequencies to exploit material weaknesses. This unit will update countermeasure parameters. Update this, Tatsumaki said, and crushed the power core. Energy erupted, not explosive. Containment systems were too good for that. But the sudden loss of primary power sent cascading failures through Mother Mold's infrastructure. Processors went dark. Quantum arrays collapsed. The distributed intelligence that had calculated millions of deaths found itself suddenly unable to calculate anything at all. The screens went blank, then flickered back to life, running on backup power text, appearing in jerking fragments. Impressive. Primary functions offline. Secondary systems compromised. Estimated recovery time, 47 days. You have successfully delayed production. Congratulations. Tatsumaki methodically destroyed everything else in the chamber. The backup processors. The dimensional anchors. The communication arrays. Every piece of hardware that could possibly support Mother Mold's resurrection. By the time she finished, the chamber looked like a hurricane had spent an hour expressing its opinion about artificial intelligence. The last screen still flickered, somehow maintaining power through systems that should have been completely severed. Final calculation, your actions today increased mutant survival probability to 51.2% within 90-day window. Statistically significant. Delay buys political capital. Narrative shifts. Time remains most valuable resource. Recommendation, continue existing. Then that screen died too. Core chamber clear, Tatsumaki reported. Mother Mold infrastructure destroyed. Good, Cyclops replied. 47-day delay buys us political capital. Time to shift narratives. That's worth more than permanent solutions that don't exist. because we have a problem. Orcus just deployed their contingency plan. She made her way back through the destroyed production levels, following Storm's atmospheric markers. The team had regrouped near the docking bay, John maintaining a telepathic shield against increasing psionic interference. "They're collapsing the forge," Cyclops explained, pulling up tactical data. "Not attacking, accelerating the deorbit. They already started the burn hours ago, but they kicked it into terminal phase the moment we breached. They're going to drop it from orbit directly onto a populated area. Make it look like our assault caused structural failure. Turn our victory into their tragedy." "Where?" Tatsumaki asked. "Greater Mexico City metropolitan area. 3 million people in the calculated impact zone. 20 minutes until atmospheric entry begins. We need to change trajectory, push it toward the Gulf of Mexico instead." Storm's eyes went white with atmospheric awareness. "I can't stop something that size. I can guide winds, slow descent, but not prevent impact entirely." "We need to change its trajectory," Jean said. "Push it off course, into ocean or unpopulated desert." Everyone looked at Tatsumaki. She felt the weight of it. The station was massive. Thousands of tons of metal and machinery already beginning its descent, gravity wells and orbital mechanics, turning it into a kinetic weapon that would devastate whatever it struck. "I can move it, she said. "But not alone. Not with the precision needed." "The circuit," Jean said immediately. "Hope can boost you again. Hope needs 48 hours to recover. It's been 24. She'll do it anyway if it means saving 3 million people." Tatsumaki knew Jean was right. Knew Hope would destroy herself trying to help. Knew the team would sacrifice anything to prevent the catastrophe Orcus had engineered. And knew that accepting help again, relying on power she couldn't sustain alone, meant admitting a truth she'd spent years denying. Some problems were too big for one person. "Make the call," she said. Hope's voice came through the comm 2 minutes later, already strained. "I'm establishing the circuit. The supporting mutants are exhausted. This is going to hurt. All of us. But we'll hold it as long as you need." The surge came faster this time, less smooth. The circuit didn't hum. It screamed. Not metaphorically. Tatsumaki could feel the lattice fracturing even as it formed mutant powers, pushed beyond safe thresholds, held together by desperate will, rather than stable architecture. Hope's voice came through wet like she'd swallowed blood. The borrowed power expanded Tatsumaki's telekinesis anyway, reaching across distances that should have been impossible, fueled by people destroying themselves to make it work. She gripped the forge, all of it. Every ton, every structural member, every piece of debris from her earlier destruction. Held it together through pure force, preventing it from breaking apart during what came next. Then she pushed, not straight up. Orbital mechanics didn't work that way. She pushed perpendicular to its descent, adding lateral velocity, changing trajectory degree by degree. The station groaned, metal shrieking, as forces it was never designed to handle stressed every joint and weld. Trajectory shifting. Storm reported using winds to augment the push. New impact zone calculating. We need 15 more degrees. Tatsumaki pushed harder. Felt the circuit beginning to fray. Hope's voice came through barely a whisper now. 30 seconds. That's all I have. 15 degrees in 30 seconds. Moving thousands of tons with precision measured in meters. The mathematics should have been impossible. She made them work anyway. The forge cleared Mexico City's airspace, with kilometers to spare trajectory. Altered just enough to send it into the Gulf instead of the metro area. It hit water at speeds that turned ocean into temporary crater, the impact visible from space tsunami warnings immediately broadcast along the coast. But no buildings collapsed. No people died. Orcus's weapon became nothing more than spectacular footage of something large falling into something wet. The circuit collapsed. Tatsumaki felt the borrowed power vanish, leaving her suspended at the upper atmosphere's edge, exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with physical stamina. Around her, the Blackbird was already moving to extract the team's storm, using every atmospheric trick she knew to catch Tatsumaki in a pressure gradient and carry her back to the aircraft, then guide them all safely earthward. "Hope?" Tatsumaki asked. Jean's response was gentle. "She's alive, unconscious. 3 of the supporting mutants are in medical crisis. They'll recover, but it was close. Closer than last time. I'm sorry, don't be. They chose to help, knew the risks, and 3 million people are alive because they made that choice." Jean paused. "Because you made that choice." The flight back to Krakoa was quiet. No celebration, no victory speeches. Just tired people processing what they'd accomplished and what it had cost. Tatsumaki stared out at Earth below at the curve of blue marble floating in darkness and thought about Mother Mold's final calculation. 51.2%, barely better than a coin flip. All that effort, all that power, all that destruction and survival was still uncertain. But it was higher than before, and that had to mean something. Cyclops moved beside her, his presence steady despite exhaustion. "You did well today." "Better than well. I almost wasn't enough." "But you were. With help. That's not weakness. That's how battles actually get won." She wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Because standing here, looking at a world she'd helped save twice now, Tatsumaki couldn't deny the truth anymore. She was stronger with them than without them, even if that scared her more than any sentinel ever could. The forge fell into the gulf and sank 3,000 meters, taking Mother Mold's infrastructure with it. Orcus would recover eventually, build new facilities, deploy new sentinels, continue their campaign with the systematic inevitability of people who believed genocide could be engineered. But not today. Today, mutants lived. 3 million humans lived. And somewhere in that arithmetic was proof that maybe, just maybe, the equation could be changed after all. Even if the calculator claimed it was only 51%. Tatsumaki allowed herself to rest against the Blackbird's hull, feeling the vibration of engines carrying her toward the island that had become temporary home. And for the first time since arriving in this dimension, she let herself consider that maybe temporary didn't have to mean alone. The thought was uncomfortable, but she was learning to live with uncomfortable, one borrowed power boost at a time. The medical base smelled like ozone and regret. 3 mutants lay unconscious in regeneration pods, their bodies recovering from what Hope's circuit had demanded. Neural pathways burned from overload. Cellular structures stressed beyond safe limits. They would survive. The pods guaranteed that. But the scars would remain invisible markers of the price paid for borrowed power. Hope sat beside them, refusing rest despite exhaustion that made her hands shake. Blood still crusted under her nose. Her eyes tracked vital signs on monitors with the focus of someone cataloging their mistakes. Tatsumaki stood at the observation window, watching without speaking. Guilt was a weight she knew well. Had carried it since she was 7 years old, and learned that power without perfect control killed people you were trying to save. "They knew the risks," Jean said quietly, appearing beside her. "They chose to help anyway. That doesn't make it right." "No, but it makes it their choice. Respect that, even if it hurts." The words sat uncomfortably. Tatsumaki had spent years making choices for others, deciding what risks were acceptable, what sacrifices necessary. Being on the other side of that equation, being the risk someone else accepted, inverted everything. "The council wants to see you?" Jean continued. "There's been a development." Development was X-Men code for crisis. Tatsumaki followed her through Krakoa's living corridors, feeling the island's bioarchitecture respond to their passage. She still wasn't used to walking on something that breathed. The quiet council chamber was tense in a way that had nothing to do with ambient temperature. Emma stood near the displays, her expression glacier cold. Magneto occupied his usual position, presence heavy with barely contained fury. Storm's eyes flickered white weather patterns, reflecting internal turbulence. and Professor Xavier sat at the chamber's center, hands folded, wearing the expression of a man who'd made a decision he didn't like. Cyclops gestured to the holographic displays. Orcus released their counter-narrative 2 hours ago. They're claiming the forged deorbit was caused by our assault. That we deliberately dropped it on Mexico City and only changed course when we realized the optics would be catastrophic. The footage proves otherwise, Tatsumaki said. Footage can be edited. Context can be manufactured. They've got expert panels explaining how telekinetic manipulation of orbital trajectories proves premeditation. How redirecting to the Gulf was damage control, not heroism. Emma's voice could have cut glass. Half the news cycle believes them. The other half is arguing about whether saving 3 million people justifies destroying military infrastructure without international approval. We saved lives. And Ortiz is using that to justify expanding Sentinel deployment. 6 countries have authorized domestic programs in the last 24 hours. Public fear is spiking. The narrative is shifting against us faster than we can counter it. Magneto spoke, his voice carrying weight that made the air feel heavy. Which brings us to the question this council must address. Can we trust her? The pronoun didn't need clarification. Every eye in the chamber turned toward Tatsumaki. We've given her sanctuary, Magneto continued. Access to our facilities, coordination with our forces. And in return, we've gained a powerful ally who has saved lives and struck meaningful blows against Orcus. But we still don't truly know her. Her capabilities, her intentions, the limits of what she's willing to do. Storm's objection was immediate. We know she's risked herself twice to protect innocent people. We know she could have destroyed Nimrod but chose removal instead. Those actions speak louder than any interrogation. Actions can be strategic, Emma countered. Playing the hero builds trust, enables deeper infiltration. I'm not saying she is a threat. I'm saying we don't have sufficient data to know she isn't. Then what are you proposing? John asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. Xavier spoke for the first time, his voice gentle in a way that somehow made everything worse. A telepathic verification, not deep probing, not violation of private thoughts. Simply surface confirmation that her stated intentions align with her actual motivations. That we're not harboring someone who represents a threat to Krakoa or mutant survival. The temperature in Tatsumaki's chest dropped to something below freezing. You want to read my mind. I want to verify that the person we're trusting isn't deceiving us, Xavier replied evenly. Orcus has demonstrated sophisticated manipulation. Sleeper agents, implanted personalities, technology we're still discovering. Given your dimensional origin and the circumstances of your arrival, we need certainty. I've given you certainty. Through my actions. Through the choices I've made. Actions can be performed for multiple reasons, Magneto said. We need to understand the reasoning behind them. Tatsumaki looked at each council member in turn. Emma's calculation. Magneto's pragmatism. Storm's conflicted expression. John's carefully neutral face that somehow conveyed apology. And Xavier sitting there, with the calm certainty of someone who believed he was being reasonable. You're asking me to let you inside my head, she said slowly. To trust you with my memories, my thoughts. Everything I've worked to keep private. Because you're afraid I might be a threat. We're asking for the same transparency we expect from everyone living on Krakoa, Xavier replied. Cerebro scans everyone who sets foot on this island. We maintain awareness of potential threats. It's how we survive. I'm not asking to live here. I'm trying to get home, while using our resources, while operating with our support, while making decisions that affect millions of people. Emma's voice was sharp. You don't get to be an unaccountable variable in a political landscape this volatile. Either we verify your intentions, or we withdraw support. Those are the options. The ultimatum hung in the air like a blade. Cyclops spoke carefully. There's another consideration. The circuit. If we're going to potentially use it again, we need to understand what we're amplifying. Hope nearly died maintaining that lattice. 3 mutants are in medical crisis. We can't justify those risks if we're uncertain about who we're empowering. So this is about the circuit, Tatsumaki said. About making sure your weapon is safe to use. It's about making sure our ally is who she claims to be, Storm corrected gently. And yes, about understanding the power we're helping amplify. Those aren't unreasonable concerns. Jean moved closer, her presence attempting comfort that Tatsumaki didn't want. It doesn't have to be invasive. Xavier can limit the probe to surface thoughts, intentions, basic verification. You'd barely feel it. I'd feel it, Tatsumaki replied, her voice flat. I'd feel someone inside my head looking at things that aren't theirs to see. Judging. Deciding if I'm acceptable. If I meet your standards for trust. Sometimes trust requires verification, Xavier said quietly. I know this feels like violation, but consider what we're protecting. Krakoa represents the last bastion of mutant sovereignty. We can't afford to be wrong about who we let into our confidence, and I can't afford to let someone root through my mind like I'm a suspect. Tatsumaki's telekinesis flickered around her unconscious response to rising anger. The chamber's bioarchitecture groaned slightly. I've fought beside you, saved your people, used power I can barely control because you asked me to. And apparently, that's not enough. It's not about enough, Cyclops said. It's about certainty in a situation where uncertainty gets people killed. Magneto leaned forward. You claim to understand the weight of responsibility, the burden of making hard choices for the greater good. Then understand ours. We have millions depending on decisions we make in this chamber. We need to know those decisions aren't being influenced by an unknown variable. I'm not a variable. I'm a person who's been helping you. Then prove it, Emma said coldly. Submit to verification. Let Xavier confirm what you've been telling us. If you're genuine, you have nothing to fear from transparency. The argument was elegant, logical, and completely missed the point. Tatsumaki had spent her entire life with people trying to control her. Government agencies wanting to weaponize her abilities. Organizations attempting to recruit her. Villains seeking to manipulate her power for their ends. And through all of it, she had maintained one absolute boundary. Her mind was hers. No one else got to decide what she thought, what she felt, what memories she kept private and which she shared. That autonomy was the only thing that had kept her from becoming what everyone wanted to make her. And now these people who she'd actually started to trust were demanding she surrender it. No, she said simply. Xavier's expression didn't change. I understand your hesitation, but I must insist. The security of Krakoa requires. I said no. Then we have a problem, Magneto stated, because we cannot continue supporting someone who refuses basic accountability. Accountability? Tatsumaki's voice went very quiet, very dangerous. I've been accountable. I've fought your battles, saved your people, put myself at risk because it was the right thing to do. But apparently that's not accountability. Apparently accountability means letting you violate my privacy because you're afraid. It's not fear, John said, though her tone suggested otherwise. It's prudence. Xavier's probe would take minutes. Surface thoughts only. You'd barely feel someone inside my head deciding if I'm trustworthy enough. Judging memories that aren't their business. Making choices about what I'm allowed to keep private. Tatsumaki looked at Xavier directly. You're asking me to trust you with my mind, while telling me you don't trust me at all. You see the problem. Storm's voice carried the weight of someone trying to find middle ground. Perhaps there's a compromise. Limited probe. specific questions. Agreed parameters that respect privacy while providing assurance. The compromise is that I've already proven myself through actions, Tatsumaki replied. But apparently actions don't matter when measured against your fear. They matter, Cyclops said. But they're not sufficient. Not in this situation. Not with what's at stake. Then we're done here. Tatsumaki turned toward the exit. Xavier's voice stopped her, not loud, not threatening, just carrying the absolute certainty of someone who believed he was right. If you leave without verification, you leave without Krakoa's support. No sanctuary, no circuit, no assistance returning to your dimension. We cannot help someone we cannot trust. She turned back slowly. You're threatening me. We're establishing boundaries, Emma corrected. You're welcome to remain as long as you submit to standard security protocols. If you refuse, you're welcome to leave. Those are the options. After everything I've done. After the people I've saved. After using power that nearly killed your team members because you asked me to. Tatsumaki's telekinesis made the air shimmer. This is how you repay that. This is how we protect millions of people, Magneto said. Sometimes protection requires uncomfortable choices. I know about uncomfortable choices, Tatsumaki replied. I make them every day. But I don't make them by violating people who've helped me. Jean stepped forward, her expression pained. Tatsumaki, please. Think about this logically. A few minutes of discomfort versus continued partnership. Access to resources that could get you home. Support against Orcus. Is privacy worth losing all of that? Privacy isn't something you lose. It's something that gets taken. Tatsumaki looked at each of them. These people she'd started to respect. Started to think of as something approaching allies. And you're taking it. We're asking for it, Xavier said. There's a difference. Not when the alternative is exile. The silence stretched. Tatsumaki could feel the Council's united front. They'd discussed this beforehand. Coordinated their positions, prepared for her resistance. This wasn't a conversation. It was an ultimatum, delivered with democratic window dressing. Storm tried once more. If the situation were reversed, if we needed your help, but you couldn't verify our intentions, what would you do? I'd judge you by your actions, Tatsumaki replied. Like I've been judging you. And right now, your actions are telling me exactly who you are. She walked toward the exit again. This time, no one stopped her verbally. But she felt Xavier's telepathic touch gentle as falling snow, attempting to make contact. Her psionic defenses snapped into place reflexively. Not aggressive, not attacking, just absolute rejection. The telepathic probe bounced off barriers she'd built over years of keeping people out. Xavier's surprised intake of breath was audible. Jean gasped slightly. The entire council felt at that moment of attempted intrusion meeting immovable resistance. Don't, Tatsumaki said without turning. Don't try that again. Your mental defenses are remarkable, Xavier observed, and there was something in his tone that might have been concern or might have been calculation. Far stronger than they should be for someone without telepathic training. That raises additional questions. Then stay curious, Tatsumaki replied. Because you're not getting answers by force. She left the chamber, Krakoa's corridors feeling less like sanctuary and more like cage with every step. Behind her, she could feel the council's debate resuming telepathic communication, flickering between members too fast for normal speech. They were deciding her fate. Whether she was asset or threat. Whether to help or hinder. And she had absolutely no say in their deliberations. The quarters they'd given her felt wrong now. Temporary housing that had briefly felt like respite now revealed itself as exactly what it always was. A room in someone else's home occupied at their pleasure, revocable at their whim. Tatsumaki sat on the edge of the bed and forced herself to think tactically. Without Krakoa's support, her options narrowed considerably. No circuit meant no amplified power for major operations. No technical support meant no help tracing dimensional pathways home. No sanctuary meant operating independently in a world that already feared her. She could probably survive that. Had survived worse. But survival wasn't the same as accomplishing anything meaningful. And beneath the tactical assessment was something sharper. Something that felt uncomfortably like betrayal. She'd started to believe these people were different. That working together meant actual partnership instead of the transactional relationships she'd always maintained. That maybe, just maybe, being part of something larger than herself didn't have to mean surrendering autonomy. Apparently that had been naive. A knock at the door. Jean's presence on the other side, obvious even without telepathy. Tatsumaki considered not answering. Decided that would be childish. "Come in." Jean entered carefully as if approaching something dangerous. Smart. "I wanted to talk, away from the council, off the record, to convince me to submit to the probe, to apologize for how it was presented." Jean sat without being invited, maintaining distance but not hostility. Xavier believes he's being reasonable. That verification is a small price for continued partnership. But he's wrong about the cost. "Then tell him that." "I did. Before the meeting, during it, after you left." Jean's expression was tired. He doesn't see telepathic verification as violation. To him, it's communication, sharing, understanding. He's spent so long in people's minds that he's forgotten what it feels like to have someone intrude on yours. That doesn't make it acceptable. No, it doesn't. Jean was quiet for a moment. "I know what it's like. Having someone in your head without permission. Taking things that weren't theirs. Making decisions about what you get to keep private." Tatsumaki looked at her properly for the first time. Saw genuine understanding there. And beneath it, old wounds that hadn't fully healed. "The Phoenix," she said, "among others." Xavier himself early in my training. He meant well, thought he was helping. But good intentions don't change what violation feels like. Jean met her eyes. "I'm not asking you to submit. I'm asking if there's any alternative you'd accept. Any verification method that wouldn't cross your boundaries. Actions should be enough. They should be. But we're in a situation where Orcus is actively infiltrating and manipulating. Where trust without verification has gotten people killed. Xavier isn't wrong about the danger. He's just wrong about the solution." Tatsumaki considered that. Weighed the paranoia that came from fighting an enemy who used deception as primary weapon against the principle of mental sovereignty. "What if I let you verify?" she asked. "Not Xavier. You. Limited scope. Specific questions. And I maintain the right to refuse anything that goes too deep." Jean's surprise was evident. "You trust me over Xavier. You understand what violation means. He doesn't." Tatsumaki paused. "And you saved my sister's life in my world. Or would have if she'd needed it. So yeah, I trust you more." "I don't have authority to make that call. The council wants verification. If they get it through you instead of Xavier, does the source matter? To Xavier, yes. He'll see it as undermining his authority, questioning his judgment. Good, he should question it." Jean actually smiled at that. Small and brief, but genuine. "Let me talk to them. See if they'll accept it." "No promises." "No promises?" Tatsumaki agreed. After Jean left, she sat in the artificial twilight of Krakoan bioluminescence and thought about her sister, about the promise she'd made to herself to get home, about whether compromising principles to achieve goals made her pragmatic or just made her compromised. Fubuki would probably laugh. Point out that Tatsumaki had spent years making other people compromise while refusing to bend herself. That maybe learning to negotiate wasn't weakness, but growth. She'd still hate it, though. The answer came 2 hours later. Not Jean, but Cyclops approaching with the careful neutrality of someone delivering news that wouldn't please anyone. "The council has agreed to Jean conducting the verification," he said. "Limited scope. You maintain veto power over specific questions. Results shared only with the council, not broadcast. It's the best compromise we could manage. And if I still refuse, then you leave Krakoa by morning. We'll provide transportation to wherever you want to go. But no further support." Tatsumaki looked at him for a long moment. "You know this is wrong. I know it's necessary. Sometimes those are the same thing." Cyclops' expression was unreadable behind the visor. "For what it's worth, I argued against it. Storm did too. We were outvoted. Democracy in action. Survival in action," he corrected. "We're not perfect. We're just trying not to get everyone killed." After he left, Tatsumaki sat with the choice that wasn't really a choice. Submit to verification, or lose everything she'd worked toward. Compromise her principles, or abandon her goals. She thought about 3 mutants lying unconscious because they'd helped her. About Hope's determination despite the cost. About the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she could change the equation Mother Mold had calculated. And she thought about her sister waiting in a dimension she couldn't reach, wondering where Tatsumaki had gone. The answer had been obvious from the start. She just hadn't wanted to admit it. When Jean arrived, Tatsumaki was ready. "Surface thoughts only," she said. "Intentions regarding Krakoa and mutant survival. Nothing about my past. Nothing about my sister. Nothing personal that doesn't affect the mission." "Agreed," John replied. "And if I feel anything that suggests infiltration or manipulation, I'll tell you before reporting to the council. You deserve to know what I find." "Fair enough." Jean's telepathic touch was nothing like Xavier's attempted probe. Where his had been snow, hers was warmth. Gentle. Asking permission at every layer. Respecting the boundaries Tatsumaki established. It still felt like violation. Like exposure. Like standing naked in front of someone while they decided if you were acceptable. But it was bearable. Barely. Jean withdrew after what felt like hours, but was probably minutes. Her expression was complicated. Relief. Concern. Something that might have been sadness. "You're genuine," she said quietly. "No deception, no infiltration, no hidden agendas. You want to go home. You're helping because it's the right thing to do. And you're terrified of becoming what people want to make you." The last part wasn't a question. Tatsumaki didn't confirm or deny it. "I'll report to the council that you're verified. No threat to Krakoa or mutant survival." Jean paused. "But there's something you should know. Something I saw that I won't include in the report." Tatsumaki tensed. "You're planning to leave," Jean continued. "Not eventually. Soon. As soon as you find a way home. You're not building anything here. Just borrowing time until you can escape. That was always the plan. I know, and I won't tell them because it's not their business." Jean's expression was gentle. "But I will say this, running away from connection doesn't make you free. It just makes you alone. I've always been alone. By choice. And that choice has protected you. But it's also cost you." Jean stood. "Whatever you decide, I hope you find what you're looking for. Even if you don't know what that is yet." After she left, Tatsumaki sat in silence, feeling the weight of verification settle over her like chains she'd agreed to wear. The council would accept her now. Would continue support. Would provide resources and access and all the things she needed to accomplish her goals. All it had cost was a piece of her privacy and the illusion that she could trust them completely. Small price. Tiny, really. She told herself that until she almost believed it. Outside Krakoa's night continued bioluminescence, pulsing with life that didn't need permission to exist. And somewhere in Medical 3 mutants slept, recovering from wounds sustained, helping someone who was already planning to leave. The guilt tasted like metal, but at least it was familiar. The dimensional signature appeared without warning. Cerebro detected at first alert systems registering spatial distortion patterns identical to the Hellfire Gala breach. Not manufactured, natural resonance. Tatsumaki's extended presence in Earth 616 had created an echo in the dimensional fabric, her psionic signature acting like a beacon, calling to her origin point. The rift was opening because she'd been here long enough for reality to notice the displacement and attempt correction. She felt it before the alarms sounded. A pull in her chest like gravity reversing. Her dimension calling her home the way compass needles seek north. The sensation was undeniable, urgent, and temporary. The rift would stabilize for maybe 6 hours before collapsing. Maybe less. This was her chance. Possibly her only chance. Jean found her already packing what little she'd accumulated. You felt it. Hard to miss. Tatsumaki pulled on her dress. The green fabric she'd arrived in, now cleaned and repaired by Krakoan biotech. Everything else she left behind. She'd come with nothing. Would leave the same way. The rift's location is problematic, Jean said carefully. It's manifesting over downtown Boston. High-density population. If you just fly through, the spatial distortion will affect surrounding buildings. Potentially cause structural collapse. So I need to be careful. You need help. Jean pulled up holographic data. The rift isn't stable. It's fluctuating. Without stabilization, passing through could tear you apart or deposit you somewhere other than your origin point. We have technology that can anchor it. Make the crossing safe. Let me guess. The technology requires the Council's approval. It requires coordination, time to set up. And yes, Council authorization to deploy Krakoan resources for interdimensional transit. Jean met her eyes. They'll approve it. But there's a complication. There was always a complication. Orcus detected the rift too, Jean continued. They're mobilizing, not to stop you from leaving. To use the event as proof that Krakoa harbors dimensional threats. They're positioning it as validation of everything they've been claiming. Why not just attack Shoot Me Down during transit? Because we're in downtown Boston with cameras everywhere and federal jurisdiction. They fire on U.S. soil in a populated area, they lose international support. Narrative warfare is safer than actual warfare when the optics are this visible. Jean's expression was grim. So they'll document everything, edit it, use it to justify Sentinel expansion without risking direct confrontation. So if I leave, I prove them right. If I stay, I miss my only chance home. Essentially, Tatsumaki looked at the data. Boston, 6 hours. Orcus turning her departure into propaganda, the same pattern that had defined every moment since she'd arrived. No clean choices, no simple solutions. Just complicated decisions with consequences she couldn't fully predict. What does the Council want? She asked. To discuss options. Xavier called an emergency session. Jean paused. You don't have to attend. You could just go. Take the risk with the unstable rift. Leave the politics behind. The temptation was real. Just fly to Boston, punch through the dimensional barrier, and let this world deal with its own problems. She'd done what she could. Saved who she could. The rest wasn't her responsibility. Except it was. Because 3 mutants were still recovering from helping her. Because Hope had nearly died, maintaining a circuit that gave Tatsumaki power she couldn't sustain alone. Because people had risked themselves for her, and abandoning them to deal with the fallout felt wrong. I'll talk to them, she said. The quiet council chamber felt different this time. Less hostile, more resigned. They knew she was leaving. The only question was how much damage her departure would cause. Cyclops presented the tactical situation with characteristic precision. Orcus has news crews positioned around the Rift manifestation site. They're claiming it's proof of Krakoan dimensional weapons testing. If you simply fly through, they'll use the footage to justify expanded Sentinel deployment globally. potentially trigger international sanctions against Krakoa. And if we stabilize the rift properly, Emma added, coordinate with local authorities, manage the optics. We can frame this as Krakoa responsibly handling an interdimensional anomaly. Turn Orcus's narrative against them. That buys you maybe a week of positive coverage, Tatsumaki said. Then they'll manufacture the next crisis. A week matters when you're fighting for survival, Storm replied. Every delay, every shifted narrative, every moment we're not actively being destroyed. Those add up. Magneto leaned forward. The question isn't whether you leave. You've made that decision clear. The question is whether you leave as an ally or as ammunition for our enemies. I was never your ally, Tatsumaki said. I was someone passing through who helped because it was right. Don't pretend that was alliance. Wasn't it? Xavier's voice was gentle. You fought beside us, trusted us with your power, accepted our support. Those are the actions of an ally, regardless of what label you prefer. The words sat uncomfortably because they weren't entirely wrong. She had fought beside them, had used their resources, had, in small moments, she tried not to examine too closely, started to think of some of them as something approaching friends. But friends didn't demand you violate your own mind for verification. Allies didn't threaten exile when you refused to compromise principles. Whatever relationship she had with Krakoa, it wasn't friendship. It was transaction. Temporary cooperation, born of necessity. What do you want from me? She asked. Coordinate your departure, Cyclops said. Let us stabilize the rift, manage the media coverage, control the narrative so Orcus can't weaponize it. In exchange, we ensure your transit is safe, that you actually reach your home dimension instead of being scattered across the multiverse. And if I refuse, just go through on my own, then you risk a crossing that might kill you, Jean said quietly. And you hand Orcus exactly the footage they want. Uncontrolled dimensional breach, chaotic departure, proof that Krakoa can't manage interdimensional threats. Emma's expression was calculating. We're not asking you to stay. We're asking you to leave responsibly. Not because we care about you personally, because your uncontrolled departure damages Krakoa's position. This serves our interests. Yours happen to align. There's a difference. The honesty was almost refreshing. At least they weren't pretending this was altruism. The irony was sharp. They'd threatened her with exile yesterday. Today they were asking her to orchestrate it properly. Politics in action. But beneath the irony was something else. Recognition that maybe they had a point. She could leave recklessly and hope for the best. Or she could accept help one final time and improve both their situations. Fine, she said. Coordinate it. But I'm not doing a press conference, not making statements. I'm just going home. Agreed, Cyclops said. We handle the media. You handle the transit. Simple. Nothing about this was simple. But Tatsumaki had stopped expecting simplicity around the time she'd fallen through a dimensional rift into a war she hadn't chosen. The preparations took 3 hours. Krakoan technicians erected stabilization arrays around the rift's manifestation point, working with the kind of efficient coordination that came from practice with impossible tasks. Local authorities established perimeter barriers 2 blocks out evacuation protocols, clearing a quarter-mile radius. The rift manifested as a vertical column, contained by telepathic dampeners and Krakoan biotech that prevented spatial distortion from spreading laterally into surrounding structures. Media staging areas were positioned at safe distance, cameras capturing everything but protected from direct dimensional exposure. Everything orchestrated to create the impression of controlled response rather than crisis management. Tatsumaki watched from a rooftop overlooking the site, feeling the rift's pull strengthen as it stabilized. Her dimension was close. So close she could almost taste the familiar physics, the subtle differences in how reality bent around her powers. Fubuki was there, waiting, probably worried sick, possibly doing something reckless trying to find her. The thought made Tatsumaki's chest tight with need to go home to stop her sister from whatever disaster she was undoubtedly planning. "You're really leaving?" Hope's voice came from behind her. The girl looked exhausted still, but standing on her own, determined to see this through. "I was always leaving." "I know, Jean told us. Not the specifics, just that you were temporary." Hope sat beside her legs dangling over the roof's edge. "I'm glad you're going home, but I'm sad you're going. Those can both be true, right?" "Yeah, they can." "The circuit really hurt," Hope continued after a moment. "All 3 times. I knew it would. Did it anyway. Because it was important. Because it saved people. Because you needed help." She turned to look at Tatsumaki directly. "I'd do it again. Even knowing how much it cost. That's what being part of something bigger means. Accepting costs because the alternative is worse. You almost died. Almost doesn't count." Hope smiled slightly. "And 3 million people didn't die. That counts a lot." The simple certainty in her voice made something crack in Tatsumaki's chest. This kid, barely older than a teenager, had risked everything to help someone she barely knew. Had maintained a circuit that was tearing her apart because people needed saving. And she'd do it again. That was either inspiring or insane, possibly both. "Your sister is lucky to have you," Hope said. "Someone who'd tear through dimensions to get back to her. That's love. The real kind. Not the easy kind." "How do you know about my sister?" "Jean mentioned you had someone important waiting. Didn't say who. But the way you move, like you're always trying to get somewhere else, that's someone heading home to family." Hope stood. "Tell her hi from me. Tell her you had people here who cared, even if you didn't want to admit it." After Hope left, Tatsumaki sat alone with the weight of imminent departure. She should feel relief, anticipation, eagerness to finally go home after being trapped in someone else's crisis. Instead, she felt complicated. The X-Men arrived as the rift reached optimal stability. Not the full team, just the ones who'd fought beside her. Cyclops, Storm, Jean, even Emma, though her presence seemed more supervisory than sentimental. "Stabilization arrays are active," Cyclops reported. "Transit window is clean. You should reach your origin point with an acceptable margin of error." "Should," Tatsumaki noted. "Dimensional physics isn't exact. But we're as certain as we can be without testing." He extended a hand. "It's been complicated, but I'm glad you were here when we needed you." She shook it. Brief, professional. The handshake of people who'd worked together effectively without becoming friends. Storm approached next, her presence carrying the weight of moral authority even without words. "You made a difference here. Changed calculations. Saved lives. Whatever else happened that matters." "Barely shifted the probability," Tatsumaki replied. 51% isn't exactly overwhelming odds. 51 is better than 49. Sometimes survival is measured in percentages." Storm smiled slightly. "May your skies be clear." Emma's goodbye was characteristically sharp. "Don't come back. We have enough variables without adding dimensional ones. But if you do come back, try not to destroy any national monuments. I'll make a note." Jean was last. Her approach carried weight that had nothing to do with telepathy. "I won't say I understand everything you went through here, but I understand some of it. The feeling of being used, of having power people want to control, of making hard choices to protect what matters." She paused. "You're stronger than you think, and not just telekinetically." "John, I know, you don't want sentiment, but I'm giving it anyway." Jean pulled something from her pocket, a small device Krakoan biotech compressed into something the size of a button. Communication relay. One-time use. If you ever need help from this dimension, activate it. We'll come. No verification required, no conditions. Just help. Tatsumaki took it, feeling the weight of what it represented. Not just technology, trust. The kind she'd refused to give, but was being offered anyway. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Thank you for not leaving us to die, multiple times." Jean smiled. "Good luck with your sister. She sounds like she needs supervision." "You have no idea." The rift pulsed stabilization arrays glowing with concentrated energy. The transit window was optimal. Time to go. Time to finally leave this complicated, frustrating, occasionally inspiring mess behind. Tatsumaki floated toward the rift, feeling her powers align with the dimensional distortion. The pull was stronger now, almost irresistible. Her reality calling her home with urgency that bordered on desperation. Below, news cameras captured everything. Orcus observers documented her departure with the precision of people building a case. Local authorities maintained perimeter barriers with nervous efficiency. And the X-Men stood watching, united front, presenting strength even as they let a powerful asset leave. She should just go, punch through, get home. Stop wasting time on goodbyes. But something made her turn back one final time. Look at the people who'd fought beside her, who'd annoyed her, who'd violated her privacy and saved her life, and made her question assumptions she'd held for years about working alone versus working together. If Orcus tries dimensional attacks again, she called down, "I'll know, and I'll come back. Not for you. For the people who'll die if I don't." Cyclops actually smiled at that. "We'll try to avoid needing you, but it's good to know the option exists." "It exists," Tatsumaki confirmed. Then, because apparently being in this dimension had affected her more than she wanted to admit, "You're not terrible at this. The teamwork thing could use improvement, but not terrible." "High praise," Emma murmured. "Take it or leave it." Storm raised a hand in farewell. "Until next time, or never, whichever the fates prefer." "Preferably never," Tatsumaki replied. But her voice carried less conviction than it should have. She turned toward the rift, properly feeling its pull align with her intentions. The dimensional barrier was thin, here weakened by the natural resonance between her origin point and current location. Passing through would be trivial with the stabilization arrays active. One final breath of Earth-6. 1/6 is air. One final moment in a dimension that had tested her in ways she hadn't expected. Then Tatsumaki launched herself into the rift. The transition was unlike anything she'd experienced. Not violent like the original breach, controlled. Guided by Krakoan technology that bent space with surgical precision. She felt herself exist between dimensions, suspended in the gap where physics negotiated which rules applied. And in that moment between worlds, she saw it. Infinite filing cabinets of reality, each drawer a different variation of desperation, survival, extinction. Earth 616, where she'd spent these brutal days. Her home where Fubuki waited. And countless others stacked beyond comprehension. Mother Mold had calculated probabilities for one drawer. But someone had to pull handles on all the others. The thought should have been crushing. Instead, it felt almost liberating. The rift released her into her own dimension like a held breath, finally exhaled. The physics snapped back to normal, to the subtle differences only she could feel. The sky was the right color. The air tasted correct. The fundamental wrongness that had permeated every moment in Earth 616 was gone. She was home. Below City Z spread out in familiar urban chaos. No Krakoa, no dimensional rifts, no Orcus manufacturing crises. Just normal disasters she knew how to handle. And somewhere in that city, a telepathic signature she'd recognize anywhere. Fubuki. Tatsumaki descended like a meteor with perfect aim, following the familiar presence until she found her sisters standing on their apartment balcony, looking up at the sky like she'd been waiting. "You're late," Fubuki said, her voice carefully casual despite eyes that looked suspiciously wet. "I was about to send the entire Blizzard group looking for you. You probably did anyway, obviously." Fubuki's facade cracked. "Where were you? You disappeared for 3 days. No warning, no message. Just gone. I thought—" Her voice broke slightly. "I thought something finally—" Tatsumaki landed on the balcony and did something she almost never did. Initiated contact. Pulled her sister into a brief, awkward hug that probably looked nothing like the emotional reunions Jean would have endorsed, but felt right for them. "I'm fine," she said. "Just took an unexpected trip, different dimension, long story." "Different what?" Fubuki pulled back, studying her with the analytical precision of someone cataloging changes. "You're serious?" "Unfortunately. Did you punch someone in this other dimension?" "Several someones." "Did you destroy any property?" "Some assembly lines, a satellite, parts of Washington, D.C. It was justified." Fubuki actually laughed. Relief and exasperation mixing in equal measure. "Of course it was. You can't go anywhere without breaking something." Her expression turned serious. "Are you actually okay? No injuries, no weird dimensional side effects?" "I'm fine. Just tired." Tatsumaki looked at her sister, at the person she'd torn through realities to return to, and felt the weight of the past days settle into something approaching peace. "How's the Blizzard group?" "Currently tearing City Z apart looking for you. I should call them off before they petition the Hero Association for emergency protocols." Fubuki pulled out her phone, then paused. "Did you make any friends in this other dimension?" The question was innocent, curious, and somehow cut straight through every defense Tatsumaki had rebuilt during the transit. "No," she said automatically, then paused, corrected herself with visible effort. "I mean, there were some people, temporarily. It was complicated." Fubuki's smile was knowing. "So yes, you made friends?" "I didn't say that." "You hesitated." "That's basically a signed confession from you." Fubuki started texting, presumably calling off the search. "Well, your complicated temporary friends can visit any time, as long as they don't destroy our apartment. They're not visiting. I'm never going back there." "Sure. Just like you were never going to let me lead my own team, or acknowledge that I'm capable, or admit you needed help with anything." Fubuki's tone was light, but her eyes were serious. "You came back. That's what matters. But you changed too. I can see it." "I didn't change. You hugged me, without being threatened. That's like a Category 5 miracle." Fubuki finished her text, then looked at her sister properly. "Whatever happened over there, whoever you met, it was good for you, even if you won't admit it." Tatsumaki wanted to argue, to insist nothing had changed, that she was the same person who'd left, just delayed by dimensional nonsense. But standing on their balcony, feeling the familiar weight of her home dimension's physics, she couldn't quite make the words convincing. Because something had shifted. Not dramatically, not obviously, but enough that the isolation she'd always maintained felt less like strength and more like habit. The self-sufficiency she'd prided herself on seemed less impressive when she'd seen what coordinated effort could accomplish. She wasn't going to transform into Jean Grey. Wasn't going to start believing in Xavier's philosophy. Wasn't going to suddenly embrace teamwork as the solution to everything. But maybe, just maybe, she could stop insisting it was weakness. "They asked me to save 3 million people," she said finally. "I couldn't do it alone. Had to accept help. Borrowed power from people who almost died, giving it to me." Fubuki listened without interrupting, patient in a way that suggested she understood this was important, and it worked. Tatsumaki continued. "We saved them, changed some calculation, made survival more likely. But it cost people, hurt them. And I'm not sure if that makes it right or just makes it necessary. Both, Fubuki said simply. It can be both. Life's messy like that. You save people by risking other people. Make hard choices that don't have clean answers. That's not wrong. It's just reality. When did you get wise? I've always been wise. You just never listened. Tatsumaki almost smiled. Still annoying, though, naturally. Fubuki gestured toward the apartment. Come on. You look exhausted. Whatever dimensional adventure you had can wait until you've slept in your own bed. The apartment was exactly as she'd left it. Minimalist, functional, nothing personal except the evidence of Fubuki's occasional visits. It should have felt cold after Krakoa's living architecture and communal spaces. Instead, it felt right. Her space, her rules, her choice to be here. Tatsumaki collapsed on her bed without bothering to change feeling. 3 days of tension finally release. Her body ached in ways that had nothing to do with physical injury. The borrowed power had left traces, phantom sensations of strength she couldn't sustain alone. She pulled out the communication relay Jean had given her, studied it in the dim light. One-time use, emergency only, a lifeline to people she'd probably never see again. She should destroy it, throw it away, sever the connection completely. Instead, she put it in her nightstand drawer, just in case, because apparently she'd learned something after all. Sleep came fast, dreamless, and deep. The kind that came after surviving something difficult and escaping relatively intact. When she woke, City Z was dealing with a minor kaiju incident 3 districts over. Nothing she couldn't handle. Nothing that required teamwork or circuits or borrowed power. Just her abilities, her choices, exactly how she preferred it. Tatsumaki suited up and paused at the window. For just a moment, she let herself think about the dimension she'd left behind. About Hope's determination, Storm's clarity, Jean's understanding, even Cyclops' precision that made working together feel less like compromise and more like multiplication. 51%, barely better than a coin flip, but higher than before. Because the equation could be changed after all. Not today, not her problem anymore, but the possibility existed. Tatsumaki flew towards the kaiju incident, ready to solve the problem the way she always had. Alone, but not quite as isolated as before. And in another dimension, on an island that breathed. The X-Men watched footage of the dimensional transit and filed it under Allies Potential, just in case the rift closed. The dimensions separated. And 2 Earths continued their struggles, both slightly changed by a connection neither had wanted, but both had needed. Probabilities shifted. Equations changed. And sometimes the math that predicted extinction encountered a variable it couldn't account for. Someone who'd learned to spite herself that being strong alone wasn't quite the same as being stronger together, even if she'd never fully admitted. Tomorrow would bring new crises, new calculations, new choices. But tomorrow wasn't today. Today, Tatsumaki had a kaiju to crush. And somewhere in another dimension, Hope Summers smiled, feeling the communication relay's quantum signature activate briefly before going dormant. Not a call for help, just acknowledgement. The multiverse had infinite stories. This was just one. But it was theirs, and that made it matter.
Hey, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And be sure to turn on notifications so you won't miss out future videos. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time in this channel.